The Undertaker's reputation by the end of the 90s was a reputation few achieve in the wrestling industry. The Undertaker had wrestled for 10 years with the WWF, and 10 years today seems like nothing, but back then it was an incredible accomplishment, and through it, The Undertaker evolved from a dead cowboy to the personification of evil. In between, he did some normal behavior, but it didn't seem like he would fully adapt and change his character. But it came from out of nowhere, and after his return in 2000, he was the American Badass. It was a significant change because it forced The Undertaker to become a character that was entirely different to who he was for 10 years. It also benefited him as a fresh start and perhaps even be himself. It seemed unlikely he would revert to the dead man persona, however it was waiting for him with open arms, and it was basically a cheat code to make money. Do I personally think he needed to go back to the dead man? Not really. He already had a successful career up to this point, and I'm sure he would have done well, especially because of his improvements in ring. 2003 was up to this point his best in-ring year, and it helped greatly he was in there with the likes of Brock Lesnar and Kurt Angle, not some random big guy. And he was enjoying this run. It was what he wanted, and had no plans of even returning to the dead man. So when WWE discussed the idea of him potentially reverting to the dead man, he didn't like it. And I quote, Mark Calloway hated the idea, absolutely hated the idea of coming back as the dead man because he thought with the American Badass character, he was multi-dimensional and he wasn't doing the head snaps and everything. He could work and go out and have a different style of match, and he felt that if he came back as the dead man, that he would have to go back to that dead man persona in the ring. We all felt, look, let's give them that at WrestleMania, the dead man, but then you can involve in the ring with your work, you can work like the American Badass, but you're the Undertaker. You're in your old garb. It was a battle. It was a multi-month battle to really convince him that this would work, and he didn't think that people wanted the dead man back. He really didn't. He just wanted to continue on with the American Badass and felt that it was a step back to go to the old Undertaker. I could say a lot of begging, but it was a constant dialogue of, we could do this, and he would come up with, what if I'm presented with this situation? How would this Undertaker react? We worked through all of that, and it took a while, but we said, take this time off, grow your hair out, and if it completely to bed and the audience is like, now we don't like it, then we can always go back. He's like, damn, you can't go back. Yes, you can. We're going to try it out. Finally, he just gave in and said, okay, I'll try it. I'll do it. The rest, as they say, is history. So convincing Undertaker in itself was a tough task, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. He was buried alive by his own brother Kane in Survivor Series and disappeared. In the following weeks, The Undertaker wasn't around, and Kane moved on like nothing was going on until the Royal Rumble when the return of the dead man was teased. Kane made it seem like he was unfazed, but his behavior in general was telling a different story. Over the next couple of weeks, Kane was the victim of strange occurrences that confirmed The Undertaker was back to being the dead man and wanted to face his brother at WrestleMania 20. The Undertaker's return here was simply one of the most iconic in wrestling history, and what makes it so good is that WrestleMania was back home and it was connecting with its own roots. Madison Square Garden. Same situation for The Undertaker, not to mention Paul Bearer's return howling, oh yeah. The Undertaker in all his glory once again embraced his true nature, although that cowboy hat was kind of goofy. His brother was distraught and emotional throughout this entire thing, and match-wise, I can't tell you much about it, but no doubt this match was memorable. It contradicts itself, but the reason why it's memorable comes down to the return of the Dead Man. Taker winning here is as obvious as a Kevin Nash match. We know what's up. The Dead Man's plans after WrestleMania were supposed to involve Brock Lesnar. He was supposed to slay the Beast, which makes sense because 1, Taker did the same for him, and 2, the return to his old character needs some demonstration of how strong he is. So they gotta go with somebody. That's how it goes. Lesnar was burnt out and didn't enjoy the plans post-WrestleMania, and there's a reason why he lost the title to Eddie Guerrero, to move him on and I assume rebuild him for a match against Triple H at WrestleMania 21. It's a big rumor at the time. Later that week on SmackDown, The Undertaker appeared after the main event, and this was after Paul Heyman was demanding respect from Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio. And they showed great respect by feeding him to The Undertaker, who was donning a bandana. So they're trying to show you that Undertaker's back. At the same time, however, Booker T was lacking. Now why Booker T? Well, we're gonna get to it in a minute. But long story short, his attitude went from very outspoken, confident, excited, to some depressed loner on SmackDown. He hated being traded to SmackDown, but it was growing on him, and before he knew it, The Undertaker was knocking on his door. He did this again the following week, but this time he was in person, and this was after Booker T claimed that he'll slap the dead out of The Undertaker. Such a very dumb claim was going to be put to the test. Booker T's misfortunes caused him to go off the deep end. He visited a psychic. She gave him a very descriptive and daunting telling of his future, and it's of course related to The Undertaker, and the 5-time champion was very curious about this and was looking for ways to put a stop. The woman gave him a list of things to do, including visiting the graveyard for some dirt, and this was all to prevent what was to pass. The Undertaker meanwhile destroyed the FBI. Booker's pursuit of this certain grave was tough, but the unmarked grave found him. He made it out quick, but found himself lucky. Man, I love these segments from this era of WWE. It showed that there was some things beyond the squared circle, and the story in general is, of course, silly. It's kind of bizarre. It's like, what the hell? But it's interesting. Booker T was carrying that dirt around thinking he was solving the problem, and this man was convinced that he had it figured out because he beat 67 overall Nunzio and 54 overall Johnny Stamboli. But Booker was in for a reality check. The Undertaker and Paul Bearer popped up, and that confidence that was radiating off of him faded like his push in 2000. 2003. This man was doing all kinds of rituals. He was following every religion out there to even get a chance to overpower The Undertaker. Paul Bearer told him that this is his judgment day, and Taker just said, "Rest in peace." It was easy business for him. Booker T's hard work was going to be put to the test. The match itself was very dry, but it was a way of establishing that The Undertaker is still one of the most powerful men out there. Hell, even more than he was in the past. Booker tried using that dirt, but he accomplished nothing. He had resorted to his usual tactics, which got him far, but not far enough, and this was going to end only one way, with The Undertaker victorious. He had one of his most underrated tombstones here to score the victory and move on to a storyline that was stranger than this Booker T thing, which was strange in itself. Now, around this time period, WWE saw The Undertaker as an attraction. That's why he wasn't appearing often on TV. He'd show up to house shows. With that said, on the May 27, 2004 episode of SmackDown, the Dudley Boys decided to abduct Paul Bearer, and Paul Heyman retrieved the urn. The urn is believed to hold the power within The Undertaker, and symbolically, literally, Paul Heyman had all the power in his hands, forcing The Undertaker to follow his commands. For Taker, it's easy to grab him and give him a beating, but it would come at Paul Bearer's expense. So Heyman wanted The Undertaker to join him and the Dudleys. The duo thought this was a foregone conclusion, feeling that the dead man would come to his senses, but Heyman didn't see it that way, because there was a reason why nobody tested The Undertaker like this. To try and take the one who's closest to him would probably result in a disastrous situation. At the end of the night, he came out and was full of confidence. His attitude was certainly different early on, but Heyman was a man of faith. Sure, he had his doubts, but it was time to find out. There was a sense of confidence because this was a tough situation for Taker, so Heyman's wish was basically granted. Undertaker went on his knee and bowed before Paul Heyman, who with the help of the Dudleys devising a brave plan of abducting Paul Bearer, has become the most powerful man in the WWE. Heyman elaborated further on this the following week, talking about how he controls the conscience of The Undertaker, Paul Bearer. Undertaker's weakness is feeling for Paul Bearer, which was his benefit. He then booked a handicap match for Great American Bash, The Undertaker against the Dudleys, and talked about the cement truck and how Taker will do the right thing and bury Paul Bearer. WWE was really messing with the budget here. Like, what is this? Heyman promised that Undertaker will do the right thing and wanted to put him to the test tonight. He proceeded to destroy a bunch of mid-carders who were cosplaying as main eventers because SmackDown was so light at the time. Then he bowed for Heyman again, showing that he will go to any lengths to protect Paul Bearer. This attack seemed to have done a number on the roster, who were absolutely perplexed and worried over things. So at this point, it was a question of who's going to step up. John Cena. Charlie Haas told him that if he wants to go out there, it's suicide. I don't think Charlie Haas is aware of the power that John Cena could summon from being Super Cena. He went out there and called out The Undertaker. Kurt Angle is a world-class hitter at this point, not to mention GM, so he booked John Cena to go one-on-one with The Undertaker. I guess this is where Teddy Long took inspiration to make it his own thing. They had one hell of a match, especially considering this was 2004 John Cena. It's not out of this world, but I think it could be in a top 10 SmackDown match up to that point. With that said, it was a nice test for John Cena to wrestle at the highest level with the most respected figure in WWE. Ironically, The Undertaker cheated to win here with the chain. Nonetheless, it was a standout from John Cena's early career. Set him up nicely to face these guys because it was only going to be regular business from here on. As for The Undertaker, the handicap match main evented, which was very questionable. However, it involved a big spot, so there's that. The match was Paul Bearer being slowly buried in the concrete and Undertaker refusing to lay down, which wasn't doing Paul Bearer any favors. The match was very boring and no doubt about it has to be the worst main event for a WWE pay-per-view that year. There's no beating around the bush, and this was following a very good JBL Eddie Guerrero match. The rules were almost complicated since Undertaker didn't want to lose, but if he won, he lost. So basically, it was a lose-lose situation. The action itself is not noteworthy, otherwise we'd be talking about it right now, but Heyman had Undertaker in a chokehold. Even though he won the match, he wanted to do the right thing, but a lightning bolt prevented him, and instead The Undertaker, with no other choice, followed through with it, telling his friend to rest in peace. And so Undertaker basically killed him. Okay, number one, I'm sure you remember seeing an old rehearsal video involving this segment on YouTube back in the day. It was like one of the most popular wrestling videos at the time. I don't know, I feel like if you were growing up in that era, you definitely saw on YouTube for sure, or somewhere else. Number two, they managed to work with Paul Bearer using a pre-tape. Another guy was in place for this one, but about the story itself, it was really building up to be something huge, because with Paul Heyman towering over The Undertaker, it had to go even further, especially after the Paul Bearer incident. A report in June of 2004 stated, it looks like The Undertaker's new alliance with Paul Heyman and the Dudley Boys could go on longer than we thought. The WWE is seriously considering turning The Undertaker heel so that he could be the next challenger to Latino Heat Eddie Guerrero's WWE Championship. If the company does decide to go through with the plan, the two could headline SummerSlam against each other as the main event for the SmackDown brand. However, once the Guerrero program is finished, there's a chance that The Undertaker could return to being a face so he could feud with Heyman and the Dudley Boys. Okay, that would have been big. Certainly bigger than JBL and Undertaker's match because Eddie was already established, and in addition, it would give a logical direction after the Paul Bearer thing, because because Paul Heyman was looking for global domination, and what better way than having the tag team champions by his side and the next WWE champion. Later that week on SmackDown, Paul Heyman explained The Undertaker's actions. He spoke about how the only thing preventing the dead man from dominating was his personal feelings for Paul Bearer. Now, he has no conscience, no restraints, and he's going to be more dangerous, all thanks to him. Suddenly, lightning strikes, and Undertaker says that his manager was a weakness for him, but also said that if he could do that to the only person he cared for, what would he do to Heyman himself? This stressed him out to the point where he issued a formal apology in his efforts to cooling down the dead man, even placed the blame on the Dudleys. He didn't want forgiveness, just a pass. Bro managed to turn himself into a victim after commanding death upon another. Undertaker seemed to have spared him for the time being in order to focus on another thing. Now, the story had a lot going for it. Sure, that main event match was bad, but The Undertaker killing Paul Bearer is supposed to be much bigger than the way that they made it out to be, because they just left the storyline as it was. But apparently it was The Undertaker who had a problem with it. Yeah, the story could have gone ways, probably would have sucked, but I don't understand why they didn't see it through. They had to involve Heidenreich later on. Well, that's a different story. On the July 22nd, 2004 episode of SmackDown, The Undertaker responded to JBL's claims of not wrestling at SummerSlam. Of course, he's the exception. JBL is strong but very restrained in his approach. Even said that he was booked in a match against Shannon Moore for the title. He gave The Undertaker the count of 3 to leave, and it was a funny moment. This thing didn't end well for Bradshaw, and The Undertaker made his intentions clear. SummerSlam, and since he had the Teddy Long pass, the match was official. JBL at this point wanted to rebound in a big way. His championship reign was being threatened by The Undertaker, and so he wanted to bounce back. So he called out the budget version of The Undertaker, who Taz called the Under-Toddler. So Undertaker was here, but the stats weren't included. He was having a little too much fun at his own expense, because out of all the people to save him at this point, it had to be Orlando Jordan. As expected, JBL portrayed himself to be a fighting champion, somebody who shows zero fear and claimed that he had plans to exploit Undertaker's weaknesses. As for Orlando Jordan, JBL made him his new chief of staff. JBL is being built up as this very strong heel, not in the sense of a fighting champion, but somebody that would come out on top in any type of situation. He had help from Eddie, and since he was liked by a bunch of the veterans, The Undertaker followed up. It was a tough situation. When you look at it, it's like, hey, this guy's a random tag team guy. According to Bruce Pritchard, Undertaker was willing to put over JBL clean to help him establish his heel character. The match itself was very plotting. Last time I watched it, damn, wasn't long. 17 minutes, but it felt like double than that. I think WWE would be wiser to pace this differently nowadays. Bradshaw didn't really win it here. He won it by DQ after the ref noticed Taker blasting him with a belt, and what followed was pure anarchy and carnage that left JBL battered and destroyed. This man came out wearing his head over the neck brace, wherever the hell this is, and he said that he had a dream to beat The Undertaker 1, 2, 3, but he robbed him of his glory by bringing in the title to the ring. JBL tried to paint himself as a victim of odd circumstances. Into this miserable promo where he's whining, complaining, he got tough and promised that Undertaker will never get a rematch. That's what he deserves, even guaranteed that he'll never become WWE champion again, and JBL was correct. Now, his statement of never getting a rematch wasn't his choice to make, and once again, this situation was goofy. It was a tough thing for JBL, and to top it all off, he left the one thing most desired by the dead man. From here, it wasn't going to get any better. He was getting his ass beat, his neck brace taken away, and Teddy Long booked the last ride match for the WWE Championship. This forced him to adapt and rethink his strategy. He decided to call out The Undertaker. Why? Because he wanted to prove he's a great champion. The chief of staff didn't want this to go down, but JBL wouldn't budge. The champion was ready for a fight, and Undertaker was like, no problem. Bradshaw felt that this was a fight for him to deal with, not Orlando, and so he took a beating. But then Gangrel and Viscera popped up to jump him. This attack almost went awry as JBL's hired guns proved that they were no more than jobbers. He had to hit a clothesline from hell to turn things around, and it was finally working. JBL's plan had come together, which was to isolate The Undertaker and give himself an advantage heading into No Mercy. But this would flip on its head in a moment, because this wasn't no skill-based matchmaking type thing. Undertaker destroyed them with ease. He eradicated them for good, one by one. Gangrel, Viscera, Jordan, and all that was left was JBL. Bradshaw was desperate to make a statement ahead of this, but it was clearly overshadowed by Orlando's sacrifice. JBL at this point, he was collapsing like Manchester United. The build for the match was stronger than SummerSlam, no doubt about it. Undertaker was shown to have more venom and sharpness in his approach after JBL sidetracked him. He channeled his own ministry persona, and if you were reading the dirt sheets at the time, you obviously knew what was going to go down, but they showed that he had a great chance, especially with the last ride stipulation, so yeah. The match was extremely one-sided with The Undertaker dominating. JBL was humbled and demoralized, and sure, he had his moments here and there, but the edge was most definitely with The Undertaker. Out of everyone to save JBL, it was Heidenreich. His distraction gave JBL the opening to throw him in the hearse and retain the title. It was revealed that Paul Heyman was riding the hearse and Heidenreich ended up driving his car into it. This, of course, would result in minor scratches to The Undertaker. He was like a character from GTA or a cartoon, except he responds in the arena. Teddy Long informed Heyman of this news, telling him that when they opened up that hearse, nobody was to be found. I mean, Teddy Long's relationship is clear. Why wouldn't he know secrets of the unknown? He was talking like Undertaker returning was a foregone conclusion, which it was. Heyman was trying to assure himself that Heidenreich was this guy that feared nothing, and it was once again, it was a big guy feud to try and get him over. Now, Heidenreich's character at the time was that he was a psycho who knew no limits. He was reading poetry from the top of the stage, assaulted a fan, and I don't even want to talk about the Michael Cole incident. They were really going all out with him. Heinrich's erratic, predatory behavior was certainly not doing him favors, and in the case of assaulting fans, he was forced to apologize. Regarding The Undertaker, Heinrich challenged him to a fight, but The Undertaker didn't appear, and instead of hurting somebody, he hurt himself. This got to the point where Paul Heyman asked Teddy Long for Heinrich to face The Undertaker, but he wanted a signed contract from The Undertaker himself. 1 week to get the signature. The meeting itself was not pleasant. Heyman was talking a lot, but Taker wasn't listening. He signed, but reminded him of the Paul Bearer situation and how he gave him a pass. The Undertaker said that signing this contract wasn't for a match, it was for the execution of Heinrich. He finally confronted him on the final SmackDown before Survivor Series. Heinrich wasn't overwhelmed and was ready to fight, but Heyman knew where the momentum lied. The build was mostly about showcasing who Heinrich was rather than The Undertaker. He was only involved in 2 segments, and one of them was backstage. The match itself was not memorable, and the problem comes down to the fact that Heinrich was extremely green. This man was not capable of having a 7-minute match, let alone a 15-minute match. But that's what happened here, and the match was hurt because of it. But it seemed like the feud was over and Undertaker was moving on because he beat him decisively. Not to mention, he set his sights on the most coveted gold once again, the WWE Championship. Heinrich, meanwhile, was losing himself, so he decided to cost The Undertaker the title in the most important moment at Armageddon. Great match, though. It was a standout from JBL's title reign and the best Undertaker match since his return to the Dead Man character. Also, one of the only times Latino Heat interacted with this version of The Undertaker, so it was good. You had Booker T, JBL, Undertaker, and Eddie Guerrero in there. No disqualification for the title in the main event. Why wouldn't it be a good match? It was great. I loved it. It was awesome. Heinrich was fearless. He saw death but came back for more and even challenged The Undertaker to a match at the Royal Rumble and was convinced that he feared nothing. The lights go out and Taker tells him that his final resting place is in a casket. Last part he showed him, Heinrich was in absolute disbelief and it was clear that the edge was with The Undertaker. Man was calling for God at this point. He was so scared, so worried over the stipulation that he managed to get a handicap match with Paul Heyman to receive a chance to change it. So if they win, they get to change the stipulation. This was horrible for the duo. Undertaker brought out 2 caskets, so Heinrich made a run for it, leading to Heyman taking the beating. Heading into the Royal Rumble, Heinrich received the sign of his future. He was out here reading poems and some bizarre stuff. He's yelling, talking about his fear of caskets, and he's spitting some white stuff. I don't know what the hell that is. I don't want to know as well. But that was the build. It was leaning towards the Undertaker victory because, well, Heinrich was asking for it. It was close to WrestleMania, and there was just no chance of him winning here. The match at the Royal Rumble was very dull, but there was a big moment where Kane saved his brother from Heinrich and Snitsky. It was a nice moment, and with the way the story was going, there was only one way it was going to end, with the Undertaker victorious, and that's exactly what happened here. Match was dull, but hey, the story's over. Undertaker gets to finally move on. So there's that. He had a mini feud with Luther Reigns afterwards, which wasn't much, honestly. If it was much, I honestly would have spoke about it in detail here, but there's not much about it. And from there, it was the Randy Orton feud. So yeah. Okay, that's the Undertaker's first year as the Dead Man once again. Opponent-wise, it was all over the place, you know? Like, it wasn't Undertaker at his very best. Some people really thought he was washed at this point, which is crazy, especially what we've seen later on. But here, you know, like, there wasn't many good matches. Character work, great. Undertaker as the Dead Man, he was a draw. Everyone was interested in him. And the way they treated him, having him come out not every week, every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, made him feel like a bigger deal than he was. He was a star attraction, the man for SmackDown. So that was nice. But, as I said, from here on, it was only going to get better. He feuded with Randy Orton, Kurt Angle. He had a lot of good stuff from here on. But this year, it was just about setting the Dead Man up for his future. It was really just about, okay, what are we going to do with him? How are we going to set him up? It was basically them trying to figure out how they were going to go about the character. And it worked, you know? Like, after this, as I said, he was going all out. He had a great run. Early 2005 wasn't exactly kind to Randy Orton. His 2004 year was probably the best and most consistent out of any wrestler in WWE, and he seemed primed for a superb 2005 with the WrestleMania main event in sight. However, Orton's face run fell through, and it wasn't like fans didn't care about him. They did. They cheered him. He was whooping Evolution's ass, but when it came down to it, a title match or whatnot, he would come up short, and by the Royal Rumble, he was getting some boos. It also didn't help that Batista just came in and intercepted his push. It worked out for the best because Batista was much more mature at the time and had the skill to navigate life as champion. Orton was seen as a bit unreliable and lacked the responsibility of a world champion because he had the skills and the intangibles of a champion, but when it came down to it, he still had a lot to do mentally before receiving the title, and even though he was the youngest champion, Orton had the aura of an uncrowned champion at this point. The Undertaker, on the other hand, was fresh off the return of the Dead Man and brought life to the Undertaker character, and with the part-time schedule, or at least a light version of the part-time schedule, it prolonged his career. It got to the point where Taker was starting to be truly unlocked. He used to be saddled with wrestlers greener than a tree leaf, but now, that's a different story. On the February 28, 2005 episode of Raw, Randy Orton discussed WrestleMania with superstar Billy Graham. He praised Orton for WrestleMania 20 and his victory against Mick Foley. However, he preferred if the Legend Killer would go out there where no other wrestler has gone before. It was all about being unique, different, and special. Orton, though, was thinking the exact same thing, and this came at a perfect time. Orton was on the rise like almost no other wrestler. He was on the level of Batista, Edge, and John Cena, yet he was much younger than them. He was 24, going up against a Phenom at WrestleMania. The Undertaker had plans to face Heidenreich and Snitsky, with his partner being Kane, and other than the brothers reuniting, it's about as appealing as December to Dismember 2006. The following week, Randy Orton spoke about desperately trying to stand out. He announced that at WrestleMania he'll defeat The Undertaker, and the fans booed. The Legend Killer said that the legend of The Undertaker will become a myth. And this is when Eric Bischoff came out. He congratulated him on making such a brave challenge and felt that the streak was going to end. However, the Raw GM saw this as something beneficial to himself, whereas Orton's mind was on other things. He made Bischoff admit that he's a legend, and we all know what he is. With Orton on the highlight reel, Chris Jericho decided to bring out somebody who was not only a legend, but had experience facing The Undertaker at WrestleMania, Jake the Snake Roberts. He didn't come alone though. Roberts felt that he should fix Orton because he's talking out of his ass. Because he respected his father so much, he told him to not bite off more than he can chew. The Legend Killer understood that facing The Undertaker is a lot more than winning or losing. Many have lost to him and felt cold and empty. Hell, Jake himself knows a thing or two about that. This is something Orton refused to be afraid of. He didn't want to go down the road others have and promised that at WrestleMania, he's gonna beat The Undertaker and he will have made a bigger impact than Jake's entire career. Roberts wanted to show him 12 feet of impact when they had a brawl. Orton drops him with the RKO and stands on top. Later that week on SmackDown was a contract signing. It seemed as if Orton was mesmerized by the legend, the myth of The Undertaker, because as you know, this was one of their first meetings. Orton met Taker before, but he certainly didn't lock eyes with the dead man. The Legend Killer admitted that he has all the respect in the world for The Undertaker, but said that soon he'll be 12-1 at WrestleMania. He refused to be afraid like the others. Hell, he even said that when Undertaker faces him, he's facing somebody like no other man. A Legend Killer. Orton even slapped him to top it all off. He was about to cause something with it, and Orton's ambition was quite similar to all those that preceded him, but the one thing that stood out this time around was the pure confidence Orton had. He said that Taker will be a name on his list rather than the opposite, and told him to think otherwise if he believed that Orton will be the one to fall victim. In 2 weeks, the streak and the legend will be dead. With that said, Orton addressed Stacy. He said that he wanted to do something for a long time, and there it was. Orton was all positive. He refused to listen to the doubters and had a message for those that think he's gonna lose to The Undertaker. He RKO'd his girlfriend. Okay, Orton ain't no simp. He doesn't give a damn, and this was 2005, yet by the looks of it, he was hearing voices. The Undertaker, meanwhile, felt that Orton had reasons for facing him at WrestleMania. It made sense, but after slapping him and running away, he's awakened the beast. Taker promised to make a victim out of someone later that night, and it was Rene Dupree who ended up taking a beating. On the final Raw before WrestleMania 21, Randy Orton gave his final thoughts regarding the show of shows. He said that the reason why he RKO'd Stacy was because she hesitated when he asked her about the match with The Undertaker. He said that you're either with me or against me, and Stacy with the doubt was a distraction. He said that the reason why others lost at WrestleMania was because they're scared. He also said that his future doesn't involve a headstone, it involves a Hall of Fame plaque. He said that he's going to start his own undefeated streak and said The Undertaker couldn't beat him. All of a sudden, the lights went out and a video of Taker's streak played. To top it all off, the ring was on fire. So what was Orton going to do now? Nothing. He's going to wait until WrestleMania. So Kane, a victim of The Undertaker's, confronted him and said that Orton's mouth says one thing but his eyes say another. Even Kane felt humble after facing The Undertaker twice. He even told him that he can't beat what he doesn't understand. He said that Orton's got 6 days to prove what's up. Now Orton's arrogance and pure ignorance brought his father to SmackDown. He couldn't get to his son and bring him a sense of clarity towards what he's getting himself into. The Undertaker though was prepared for a fight. He said that when he told Orton to go out there and try to fight the biggest and baddest guy, he didn't expect him to go about it like this. He showed great respect to The Undertaker and held himself responsible for Orton's actions. After what Taker did to Rene Dupree, he realized he had to do something about it. He said that Randy Orton is the future of this business, but not if The Undertaker takes him out at WrestleMania. The dead man said that it took one slap for Orton to seal his fate, and it got to the point where Orton got on his knee and begged Taker. All of a sudden, Randy came out and dropped him with an RKO, and this was proven to be a setup, and it showed that the father, Cowboy Bob Orton, was the ultimate tactician. WrestleMania proved to be a defining moment in Randy Orton's career. His heel turn really brought back his momentum easily. I mean, this is the same character trait Orton had when he was at his absolute best a year earlier. But on his mind around here was a totally different thing. You see, he missed the rehearsal for the match. And I quote, "I was 24 and I was a little bit of a back then. We have the Hall of Fame in WrestleMania. The day of the Hall of Fame that morning, we had rehearsal. It was my father, John Laurinaitis, Ricky Steamboat, I believe Mike Chioda, and Undertaker were part of rehearsal. There was a sixth man who was supposed to be there. It was me. Let's just say I got into some trouble and didn't get much sleep. Just in case my kids are watching, this is my second WrestleMania. I'm 24. I've been given the world. My dad is there. Taker is there. I got down there just as they were finishing up and walking out. I worked with The Undertaker for a year, and it started out with me missing rehearsal for the biggest match of the year. A lot of people may have opinions of me about early in my career, but nobody considers myself more of an asshole than I do. I should also note that The Undertaker didn't tell Vince about this, otherwise who knows what would have happened to Orton's push. That said, watching the match, it's like Orton was there during the rehearsal. He brought it and then some against The Undertaker. For me, yeah, it was the best streak match up to this point, no doubt about it. Orton posed a huge threat in many ways. The pace, the aerial moves, and to top it all off, his father. There were so many huge moments where the streak could have ended. That chokeslam counter into an RKO is still one of the most memorable moments from an Undertaker match at WrestleMania. It's so damn iconic. Orton's ambition brought him his demise, and The Undertaker went 13-0. Probably the closest Undertaker came to losing at WrestleMania. Rumors circulated at the time of Orton potentially being the one to end it, but after the infamous party night, he was reprimanded. Is that true? I don't know, but one thing for certain is that the match was awesome. It's an important night in Orton's career, and it'd only get better from here on. Once again, I should mention, if there's another rumor that Orton was pegged to be the one to end the streak, but out of respect for The Undertaker refused to do so. I couldn't really find much about it on the internet, but I just wanted to mention it. The next night on Raw, Randy Orton in disbelief spoke about WrestleMania. He claimed that if his shoulder didn't give out, he would have beaten The Undertaker. Orton's injury was something that had occurred before WrestleMania. The worry was his match with The Undertaker would be affected. He was out for 2 months, which allowed him to undergo surgery. By the time he returned officially, I should note, it was on SmackDown. On the June 16, 2005 episode of SmackDown, The Undertaker was set to face JBL in a no disqualification match. During the match, Randy Orton made his return and dropped The Undertaker with an RKO, costing him the match. Orton then revealed that he was a draft pick and said that Taker better get used to RKOs. The Legend Killer was in much better condition than last time around, but his return was delayed for a month. Similar to last time, he dropped The Undertaker with an RKO and cost him a title shot. The reason why I attacked him was because he wanted to beat him. It was as simple as that. He refused to rest until he's on the list of legends he beat, and he wanted an answer right now for SummerSlam. The lights go out and he addressed Orton from somewhere. Taker accepted the challenge and said that he'll rest in peace. With SummerSlam on the horizon, Teddy Long wanted to bring somebody familiar with The Undertaker to face the Legend Killer. He wasn't exactly happy about the opponent being a mystery, as this was Orton's first match since April and his first match back on SmackDown. His opponent ended up being Kamala. The Legend Killer was somewhat fazed by this, but didn't allow it to hurt him. He won the match, but afterwards The Undertaker sent a message. He did it again the following week, but it was a little different this time around because he appeared in person and dropped him with a chokeslam. For Orton, SummerSlam was an opportunity to add to his already superb list. The match itself, though, was WrestleMania was a much better one. Here, Orton mostly went after the leg, but the work wasn't that interesting. It did pick up near the end, but they had better matches. A fan randomly interfered, leading to Orton hitting the RKO and winning the match. He finally defeated the Dead Man with the help of the fan, who ended up being Cowboy Bob Orton, and Taker was anything but happy. Yeah, this is just a match, honestly. Like, SummerSlam 2005 is probably my favorite SummerSlam of all time, but this really wasn't that good, honestly. It was very disappointing, especially when you've seen what they did at WrestleMania 21. You saw what they were truly capable of, they just didn't deliver it here. Later that week on SmackDown, Randy Orton felt like he had to give back. Since he ended the legend of The Undertaker, he had to look out for him. So he was going to auction out this DVD on WWE.com for The Undertaker's retirement fund. Why? Because the legend of The Undertaker is dead. The following week, Orton elaborated further on this. He called his father a genius and asked the fans if they'd seen The Undertaker. Orton told him to support him with the whole auction thing, and he promised to match the highest bid and bring the proceeds to SmackDown next week. Orton even invited Undertaker to come and take the proceeds himself. He did show up, but it clearly wasn't for the proceeds. Damn, I said that word a little too much. He said that at SummerSlam, Randy and his father had all their fun. They can hide with the rubber masks, but they can't hide from the dead man. He promised that they'll know what death and The Undertaker have in common. The Undertaker told Orton that his time has come, and when the Legend Killer came out, his attitude wasn't all that different. Orton said that he was surprised that The Undertaker would come back after he killed his legend. As a man of his word, Orton brought out a check, and on behalf of RKO Enterprises, he signed it, and the check was worth $1,416. Then he provoked him, saying if he wants it, he should come and get it. Now, Taker makes way more than that. We all know that. So he set the check on fire and sent them running. Randy Orton's claims of the legend being done was going to be put to the test. Why? Because he was going to go one-on-one with The Undertaker. Even then, Orton had something up his sleeve, teasing a surprise for the match. Now, this one was much better than the SummerSlam match. There was more drama this time around with the Ortons bringing in a casket, which contained a mannequin of The Undertaker, and he was in shock like never before. But it didn't affect his performance overall as he won it with the tombstone. Randy at this point was trying to match Undertaker mentally. He said that he may have lost, but in his eyes, he won. He said that the moment The Undertaker saw that casket, that mannequin, he saw himself. Now, little did Orton know at this point. He claimed that The Undertaker had fear because he saw into his future, and the fans were starting to go crazy for obvious reasons. Orton's talking, he's shouting at them to shut up, and then he realizes what's up. So he stares into the casket, and like Finn Balor's push recently, Undertaker emerged from the dead. Now, mind games Orton was talking about were clearly inferior to what The Undertaker was capable of. Soon enough, Cowboy Bob Orton had to face the dead man. His son was facing The Undertaker at No Mercy, so I wanted to take care of him before the match. This ended up being a setup, and the duel gave everyone a preview of the show. Bob Orton did not win despite the attack, and The Undertaker rebounded to win it. On the final SmackDown before No Mercy, The Undertaker gave the Ortons a preview of No Mercy, bringing out a casket. Randy was horrified, and then to top it all off, he appeared in the ring. With regard to the casket match and No Mercy, honestly, it wasn't that good. For one, it was a handicap match, and two, it was a casket match, so it was going to be hard to do this one. The match was plotting and just something you hoped would end. It was pretty damn long. Getting Bob Orton in the casket wasn't a problem for The Undertaker. It was Randy who was an issue. For the Ortons, The Undertaker was constantly knocked down and would get back up, but two men ended up overwhelming him, and the Ortons won it. It dragged on a bit. 2-on-1 wasn't going to be an amazing match, but it is what it is. After the match, Randy decided to make it personal. I mean, they're already personal, but consider this personal premium. He destroyed the casket and doused it in gasoline. He was promising the final nail in the coffin for The Undertaker, and in his eyes, this was going to end the legend, the myth of him. So he set it on fire. Taz was losing on commentary, and for Orton, he was off to other things. Later that week on SmackDown, the Legend Killer talked about the events of No Mercy. The crowd didn't want anything to do with Orton in light of his actions, and he said that he did the impossible on Sunday. He destroyed the legend of The Undertaker, a 15-year legacy gone buried. Orton also insulted the fans who were waiting to see The Undertaker, and he then focused on the World Heavyweight Championship. Now, at the time, there were rumors of a Buried Alive match with Orton. Legend Killer had nothing planned for Survivor Series and made sense, and in addition, he had lost the Survivor Series qualifying match. So the team was stacked. He was clearly going to do something because he was on the show every week. Unfortunately, Eddie Guerrero passed away on November 13th. His tragic death brought a change of plans. Orton was added to the match as a final participant, and his performance during the match was elite. He won it for SmackDown, and the roster had him on their shoulders. Then the lights went out, and it was clear who was coming. Orton was doubting it, but deep down he knew he couldn't kill what was already dead. The casket gets burnt up, and Taker just pushes the lid, and he's back with a beard and a vengeance. He dropped the SmackDown guys. Matt Hardy refused to take a tombstone and made a run for it, which led to a punishment from those in the back. And even though Randy Orton left unscathed, he was next. Amazing return, definitely one of Undertaker's best, and it marked the beginning of his best pure striker run, which was my favorite of his. Later that week on SmackDown, The Undertaker came to the aid of SmackDown, I guess. From out of nowhere though, Randy Orton came in and hit the RKO. He went looking for a weapon when he sat up. Once again, the numbers got to him, and Orton ended up doing it again. He sat in Eddie Guerrero's lowrider and backed it up into the Titantron, causing an explosion. And for Orton, he once again took out the legend, and in his eyes, he thought The Undertaker was gone. It was kind of sad seeing Eddie's lowrider get destroyed because they'd been honoring him, this and that, and it was just a bit unfortunate. But with that said, once again, Orton showed that he's the most despicable heel out there. Even Triple H wasn't doing this kind of stuff at the time. Randy Orton said that what he did to Undertaker speaks for itself. He told the fans that The Undertaker isn't going to rise from the ashes tonight. No, his legacy is killed, and he did it. The only phenom in the WWE is him. Orton wants something to show for all this. A title match. Legend Killer was an impatient man, and he was going to go to Batista's locker room and ask. If he doesn't accept, he'll spit in his face. After beating Matt Hardy later that night, Randy Orton was met with his rival. The Undertaker greeted Orton and asked if he thought he killed him, and he tried to make a run for it, but Taker blocked the exits. He asked if Randy felt safe and told him that his destiny is right before his eyes. Randy tried killing him, but he's the one who does the killing. He realized there was no way out, and the Undertaker told him where he's going. He said that he's going straight to hell, and a cell. And upon hearing this, Orton knew that his destiny was sealed. Teddy Long confirmed the match because Undertaker's secretly the general manager, and Orton's out here talking about Batista. Well, he's like, oh, I'm not messing with The Undertaker. Hell in a Cell, Armageddon, the match is on. The following week, Randy Orton called out The Undertaker. He said that it was unfair and admitted that he was this close to snapping. He then began messing around with the title and trying, and Orton wanted him now. He said that he didn't want Hell in a Cell. He wanted to finish it tonight. Orton was begging him, and then a video of Undertaker inside Hell in a Cell played, and the man lost it. The man was losing it, and Taker told him that he's on the fast lane on the highway to hell. Orton was trying to gain his composure, but when he was seeing things like this, it was like staying out of trouble at the time. It was almost impossible. A while later, he was looking at things again. Orton admitted that he got him and it was going to make a run for it, but then his car drove off by itself and Josh Matthews became The Undertaker for a minute. On the final SmackDown before Armageddon, Randy Orton was prepared to do something huge. First of all, he was going to see a sports psychologist. Orton explained things to that doctor, and it got to the point where that doctor wanted Teddy Long to call off the Hell in a Cell match. Randy Orton, meanwhile, congratulated Batista and told him that he's #1, and he also held regret in them never facing off. Orton admitted that this wasn't easy, but it was something that he had to do. He said that nobody could kill the legend in The Undertaker, and Hell in a Cell shortens careers. He refused to allow it to happen to him, and he had a choice to make. 4 years from now, he could be sitting in a wheelchair, all because of the Hell in a Cell match with The Undertaker. They said that it was going to be like no one else and go out on top. So what was this about? Randy Orton announced his retirement from WWE. So at this point, other than WWE, he could show up as Keith Orton in TNA. He had a choice, and now it's to kill a legend, his own. All of a sudden, Teddy Long came out and said that Orton has a commitment to himself, to SmackDown, and to all the fans out here. He threatened legal action if Orton didn't show up at Armageddon, and the Legend Killer felt that Teddy Long didn't understand a thing and would prefer to sit in court rather than have the Hell in a Cell match. As he's walking away, The Undertaker came out. Orton was begging him, saying he didn't want to fight, and all of a sudden, a Druid stood on the ramp. The Undertaker was confused, and to top it all off, the Druid brought out the urn. He revealed himself, and it was Cowboy Bob Orton. Randy took advantage of the distraction and low-blowed him and attacked him. Orton was confident and poised to drop him head of Sunday, and he did just that with an RKO, but The Undertaker sat up. So he knocked him down with a chair, and this attack left the dead man, The Undertaker, a bloody and battered man. To top it all off, Orton dropped him with the urn and told him that he'll see him Sunday at Armageddon. That was a nice segment. I love the build of this match. What it comes down to is Orton's confidence, his drive. He screwed him over. That's basically what it comes down to. He doesn't know what he's messing with. These guys have told him for several months not to mess with The Undertaker, yet he's still doing the same exact thing that the others were warning him about. Orton convinced everyone that he's finished like Ric Flair in 2008. He had the facial expressions down, the walk, the look in his eyes, but he was more than prepared for Hell in a Cell. Randy felt that The Undertaker's power was in his hands, and similar to his previous self, he showed no fear. And of course that's all talk, because when the door shut, it was a different story. In the beginning, Orton was all about running away. Slowly, he was gaining confidence and composure, but Taker, of course, had experience in this match. He busted Orton up, and The Undertaker was punishing him, and it got to the point where Orton had to fight to survive, and even then, The Undertaker was still in control. But from out of nowhere, the Legend Killer struck with an RKO. At this point, it was more back and forth. Cowboy Bob Orton got involved from the outside, and The Undertaker showed him what Hell in a Cell was all about. He ended up bleeding, which was terrible. Why? Because he has hepatitis C. John Laurinaitis, who was probably busy scouting a woman, allowed him to go out there and bleed in a match with The Undertaker. Taker hit the chokeslam on Orton, but he had his foot on the rope, and the Legend Killer's opening came with a low blow and a steel chain. He dove through a table, but it still wasn't enough. The Undertaker bounced back with the last stride, but ended up taking a tombstone from Orton. Still wasn't enough. The Undertaker sat up, Orton's father comes in, the distraction didn't work, and Cowboy Bob Orton took a tombstone. Then The Undertaker hit it on Randy Orton to win. Awesome match. It provided a great ending to the feud. It made sense for The Undertaker to beat him. He's been screwed over, burned alive, crashed into the SmackDown stage, and every time he comes back. This Hell in a Cell match isn't the best, but it's certainly another good one. Randy Orton was humbled and finally learned why you don't mess with The Undertaker. It was a long story from February where Orton was constantly telling others why he's unlike the previous guys. He has so much poison and ambition to the point where that very same drive caused him his ultimate demise inside Hell in a Cell. The Undertaker reclaimed the urn and stood atop the cell victorious in this feud. This was also the final Hell in a Cell match with the original structure. The structure they brought in for the next one was much bigger and much more, I'd say, safer. But yeah, great feud. Randy Orton found this would end up a bit lost until the Royal Rumble where he'd feud with Rey Mysterio. When I mean lost, I mean mentally, because he was still processing the Hell in a Cell match. The Undertaker, on the other hand, returned and faced Kurt Angle on No Way Out before feuding with Mark Henry. Okay, why do I like this feud? It was long, there's twists and turns, simple as that. Randy Orton once again showed he's despicable. He's the biggest heel in WWE at this point. He was out here trying to kill The Undertaker. Randy Orton grew so much as a performer at this point. Before this, he was a guy with no direction, but now he was poised to challenge for the World Championship, which he was probably going to win at WrestleMania 22 if he didn't screw up. That's how much this feud helped him, even though he lost at the end. He added to his character the depth of the legend killer character. The aura around him, you felt like this guy was a true main eventer at this point. The Undertaker, after a month away, returned. Michael Cole, for the 100th time, couldn't believe it. Is it? Could it be? No, it's Batista. The Undertaker on a chariot came out, and Angle stood in the middle of the ring in doubt. The Undertaker signaled his intentions before dropping the damn ring. Kurt was terrified as the Rumble went off the air. Now, a little side note, I searched this myself. I tried to find out when was the last time SmackDown main events at a Big 4 pay-per-view. And yeah, I know they had some main events involving Raw, like the Royal Rumble and Survivor Series, but for a match that featured only SmackDown stars, WrestleMania 19, 2003 was the last time a SmackDown match that featured exclusively SmackDown talent main evented a Big 4 show. Since The Undertaker had a healthy relationship with Teddy Long, he was the #1 contender for Angle's title at No Way Out. After hearing Undertaker's intentions, Angle came out and he wasn't afraid. Sure, he was terrified on Sunday, but now he don't give no damn who his opponent was. Whether it be Batista, Randy Orton, Barney, The Undertaker, whoever came, he'll go through them. Angle said that he's proven time and time again that he's the best in the world, and while the dead man is the Phenom, he's a wrestling machine. And despite not being that similar to The Undertaker, when the bell rings, he doesn't have a soul either. And at No Way Out, he plans on breaking Taker's ankle in pieces. The Undertaker had no doubt that Angle's intentions were truthful, but despite that, he's gonna rest in peace at No Way Out. Then the lights went out and The Undertaker disappeared. Angle was once again out of his element and he was perplexed, like one moment he's here and another he's gone. As for the match at No Way Out, I could sum it up in one word. Legendary. I used to say this a lot in those earlier videos, but I have to say it now. This was one of the greatest matches in the history of this company. In the history of WWE, this is one of the best. At this point, The Undertaker had just begun the awesome run. He started off this run with Randy Orton, and now Kurt Angle is going to bring out the absolute best in the Phenom. And dare I say this, that this was The Undertaker's best matchup to this point. Keywords: singles matches, not including the no DQ matches or anything like that. They put on a clinic, and I seriously recommend you watch this, because Angle was a legit badass, and best pure striker Undertaker is the best Undertaker for me. The story of the match, tremendous. It wasn't Kurt Angle who didn't know what he got himself into, but it was The Undertaker. Initially, the dead man targeted the arm for a bit, but then later on, Angle picked the leg. At every moment, he had the ankle in mind. When The Undertaker was on the offense, no problem. If Angle's aware of his surroundings, then he goes for the leg. The dead man did buy himself some time during the match, but then there's this one moment when Angle grabbed Taker's leg in the middle of a leg drop. The Undertaker was screaming in pain, and Angle refused to let go up until the ref reached the count of 7. Like I said, every time. The Undertaker had a bit of the upper hand. Eventually, Angle grabbed the ankle. At one point, Angle even slammed Taker through the announce table, and he continued to thwart the Phenom's attacks every chance he got. Chokeslam? Nope. Instead, it's an ankle lock. Taker did use some holds of his own, but they weren't as effective as the ankle lock. There were some moments where there was doubt over whether Angle was going to make it as champ, but every moment we even entertained the thought of that, Angle bounces back with the ankle lock. Basically, the story of the match, ankle lock, ankle lock, ankle lock, ankle lock, ankle lock. I know I said it too much, but that's the story of the match. Near the end of the match, The Undertaker and Kurt Angle went back and forth. The champion ran straight into Tombstone position, but he countered it, however. As he tried attempting the Tombstone himself, Taker countered it only to run into the ankle lock once again. Taker was considering just tapping out, but he managed to break the hold. Once both men got up, Angle performed the Angle Slam, and as he tried to hook the dead man's legs, The Undertaker locked him in a triangle choke. It seemed like it was locked in tight and Angle was going to lose the title, but nope. He rolled through and he barely beat The Undertaker. Oh, that was clean, alright. Like, both of his shoulders were down on the man. I mean, it wasn't dirty. Taker thought he won, but then it was revealed that Kurt Angle was the winner. He grabbed the champion and shoved him into the corner before shouting that he's got his number. Wow, what can I say about this match? I had to summarize it like this because I wanted to capture the essence of what makes and why this match was iconic. It is definitely in my top 5 favorite matches of 2006. Meanwhile, both Randy Orton and Rey Mysterio were Kurt Angle's challengers for the title at WrestleMania. But before he had the chance to face them, he had to deal with The Undertaker once again. This one doesn't get enough love. I cannot stress it enough. Another matchup that delivered, and at this point in WWE, there wasn't many classic normal matches. Chances are the best matches around this time period involved either Chris Benoit, HBK, or Kurt Angle. The most memorable matches from this era were always no DQ, Hell in a Cell, ladder matches, and stuff like that. Well, for normal matches, chances are it was one of those 3 guys that were involved. Now, the reason why this wasn't and isn't mentioned as much, and this is my reasoning, is because of the ending. The Undertaker perhaps was on the brink of championship glory, but then Mark Henry interfered and he caused a DQ. He had a splash through the announce table and Angle steered past The Undertaker, and now his focus was on both Randy Orton and Rey Mysterio. Shortly afterwards, a match was made for WrestleMania. The Undertaker versus Mark Henry in a casket match. At Saturday night's main event, Daivari was claiming Henry wasn't scared of the Undertaker and caskets, and Henry himself shouted that Taker's the one who's afraid of him. He promised to shove the dead man in the coffin if it's the last thing he'll do. And now he came, the Druids and the Undertaker. They brawled then and there, and Henry brought the fight. He didn't back down. The dead man recovered, and Daivari received a chokeslam and a tombstone on top of the casket, and he wasn't to be seen with Mark Henry following this. On the final SmackDown before WrestleMania 22, Mark Henry gave a eulogy for The Undertaker's undefeated streak. He listed every victim of the streak, from the Superfly to the Legend Killer. But, in Henry's eyes, that was the past. The future is here. He then said that the future is in him. He's not wrong about that. And he's the one who took out Batista. He's the one who pinned the world champion, and he's the one that will end The Undertaker at WrestleMania. You know, about that one, I actually did some searching, and the WWE actually considered ending it with Henry. They obviously thought Angle was the right choice, but Rey Mysterio had to get his moment, so there's that. Now, about the match, it was decent. There's no doubt in my mind it was Mark's best match in WWE up to this point. Taker really put in work, and while it wasn't the best match on the card, it wasn't the worst either. We all know Taker won to go 14-0. On the April 7, 2006 episode of SmackDown, the Great Khali along with Daivari interrupted The Undertaker's match with Mark Henry. The commentary team made him seem like the biggest man in the world. He no-sold 2 right hands and hit 1 head chop that knocked down The Undertaker. He sat up and Khali exposed the steel turnbuckle, throwing Taker into it, and he basically made the dead man look like a jobber. The fans were booing, Taz and Cole were at a loss of words, and nothing Taker could do was able to face the monster. It was a very impressive debut. It made him seem like this unstoppable force for good or for bad, you know. Definitely memorable, that's one thing to know. The following week, Daivari addressed last week and gave us an idea of who the Great Khali is. Also, does Khali look much bigger here than he does in later years, or is it just me? For some reason, the fans loudly chanted USA, and Daivari said that standing before them is a real phenomenon. You know, he's taking jabs. He gave everybody the details on Khali's height and size, and it was essentially heel manager and big guy 101 stuff. He's talking like, oh, the earth trembled at his gaze. And then it was time for Khali to speak. I don't know what he said at all, and Daivari told everyone that they will obey, worship the Great Khali, something along the lines of that. So for those of you that were waiting on Khali's debut, well, you didn't have to wait long because poor Funaki was set to face him the following week. On commentary, Taz was hearing rumors that the Undertaker's spirit has been broken, and as for Funaki, he took 3 moves and was easily dismantled. It was a pure squash. Blow dryer boots were in the air, and the Undertaker was not seen or heard once again. Next week, same thing. Khali asserted his dominance. The Undertaker still not found. He's missing. Daivari spoke about how for years people have tried to destroy The Undertaker, but like a phoenix, he always rises from the ashes and bests them. Until now. Khali didn't need any help. All he did was use his bare hands to dismantle the Phenom. Undertaker chants intensified, while Daivari bragged about how he's gone for good. He continued claiming that The Undertaker was afraid of Khali, and if that wasn't enough, Khali spoke on the mic. What chants were in the air, nobody understood anything, and I think he called himself the Ring of the King. He's doing some unnecessary things such as scaring off Crystal, and I don't think anybody that knew what he was capable of anticipated the showdown between the two. I don't know, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. I mean, as a kid, whenever I seen Khali, I always wanted his opponent to beat him. That's one thing to know. As a matter of fact, The Undertaker finally broke his silence by signing the contract for a Judgment Day match against Khali. Before the match went down at the pay-per-view, the Giant managed to score a clean victory against the World Heavyweight Champion Rey Mysterio. Now, looking at the booking of Rey's title reign, it's honestly the most bizarre stuff. Like, if it was anybody else, I doubt they would have them lose clean, or nearly clean, 1 month into their title reign in their own hometown. But since it was Little Ray, they took advantage. I mean, it did add to his story with JBL, but that's a whole other thing. I'll probably talk about that in another video, hopefully. Anyways, Khali bullied Ray, he no-sold his moves, and JBL decided to get involved striking the champion. Khali dominated and beat him, that's it. Khali beat the world champion nearly clean. On the final SmackDown before Judgment Day, Khali spoke once more. He told Taker that he'll rest in peace, I believe, and those final 3 words were the only thing I understood. From Taz's perspective, he thought The Undertaker was capable of beating Khali because of the fact that he laid down the challenge first. You know, he wasn't afraid of the Great Khali. Also, I was looking at internet rumors, and there was something out there about how Judgment Day might be Khali's final match in the WWE. Why? Because there was a worry that he was going to injure his opponents due to his bad in-ring skills. Take it as you like, because we all know what happened afterwards. Moving on, their match at Judgment Day, I don't think you'll like it. That's one thing to know. Was there a positive from this match? Yeah, the fact that The Undertaker sold his ass off to make Khali look legit. He tried the regular stuff, but it wasn't working, and he was quick and elusive at times, but Khali was one step ahead. Old school? Hell no. One thing to know is that the crowd was certainly rooting for him. He took a chop and managed to kick out. The fans were feeling it, but Khali didn't give a damn. Taker finally hits old school, managed to get Khali stuck to the ropes. Daivari gets involved, ref shenanigans, and eventually Khali recovers. He hits the boot, but Taker barely sets up. up, chop a boot, and that's all she wrote. Yup, he beat The Undertaker nearly clean, might be clean to you, and neither Taz nor Michael Cole believed it. The crowd was stunned, no lie. They were completely speechless over this, and it's weird to think, like, The Undertaker losing clean, it doesn't happen very often. I think you could easily count the number of guys Taker lost to clean during the 2000s. There's not many. After this, who did The Undertaker lose to clean? Batista. And then Vladimir Kozlov, and that's within a span of 3 years. But yeah, they were trying to really push Khali hard, you know, they're trying to get into the Indian market, I believe. So yeah, for some reason, they brought out Roddy Piper the following week to interview the Giant. He made jokes about Khali and Davardi, who took offense saying that he wanted to hear the tough questions. What were the tough questions? What does this guy eat? Davardi's like, well, he eats people like you. Hot Rod was just messing around and decided to push Khali's buttons, calling The Undertaker the toughest guy in WWE history. Davardi responded saying that the great Khali is the new phenom of the WWE. Piper wanted to speak eye to eye with him, but he preferred to speak with his actions, and this humbled him if only for a moment because, well, Hot Rod wanted to kick Davardi's ass. Khali quickly grabbed him and easily dropped him down to the mat. So at this point, The Undertaker, he wasn't seen, he wasn't heard from in nearly 2 weeks. Over the next couple of weeks, Khali interfered or wrestled in a couple of matches against lower card talent. He was always on the offense and always stood tall in the end. And the two, Davari and Khali, continuously taunted The Undertaker until the July 7th, 2006 episode of SmackDown. On this night, JBL was annoyed over the lack of The Undertaker and the taunting continued. This time around, Tatanka was the victim. He took a beating so badly that they played his music, Khali's music, before the match even concluded. Afterwards, Davari opened up the casket, but the lights flickered, smoke emerged from the casket, and all of a sudden, The Undertaker took over the speakers and accepted Khali's challenge of a Punjabi prison match. JBL was probably the most excited guy in the arena, and since Taker sort of showed himself to the great Khali, Davari tried asking him to do it again the next week. It was clear that he was trolling, but it came true and Khali's eyes were about to pop out of his head, not out of fear, but out of anger. Davari was very confident in the great Khali, scoffing at The Undertaker's appearance, and so he struck with lightning, and this didn't even faze the great Khali at all. As a matter of fact, he was actually looking for a fight, but Davari begged for him not to enter the ring. So yes, The Undertaker realized he's got to fight back, he's got to destroy this monster. The next night on Saturday night's main event, he praised the hell out of him that the Big Show decides to interrupt. He was pretty impressed with the size of the great Khali and wanted to put him over verbally, but The Undertaker appeared. He wasn't backing down from this colossal pairing, and as a matter of fact, he brought the fight. Big Show made it seem like he didn't want none, but he was lying in ambush to Phenom. He managed to fight back, they exchanged blows, and Taker was winning the slugfest, but Khali comes in. Doesn't matter, why? Because it was going to be chokeslam time, but unfortunately, both men countered with a chokeslam of their own. Now at this point, nobody, and I mean nobody, knew what was the Punjabi prison match. JBL claimed he heard of it, kayfabe, but never saw for himself. Later that week on ECW, Big Show defended the title against The Undertaker. For some reason, I always forget about this run. I gotta add it to my list. Like, it's just one of those things I always forget to make. I always think, like, wait a minute, should I make a Big Show video? I haven't made something about him in a while. Then I think of something else and I just ditch him. He was this classic heel that faces a bunch of visitors and manages to destroy them, clean or dirty, doesn't matter. At the end, he always stands tall. Also, the thought of seeing The Undertaker on ECW sounds and looks so weird. It's like seeing him on NXT or something along the lines of that. During the match, the great Khali interfered. Taker wasn't afraid of him, but the numbers got the best of him. He got extreme and blasted Khali with a chair in the head, but he didn't drop. Unfortunately, though, the two big guys overpowered him and chokeslammed him through the announce table to end the show. Why is Big Show in a partnership with Great Khali? I don't know! Now, about their match at the Bash, there was a huge, and I mean huge problem. Apparently, the great Khali had a diseased liver and thus couldn't compete. His hepatitis C test didn't come in on time, and so they didn't allow him to compete. Also, looking at the pay-per-view, it was so damn cursed. Bobby Lashley couldn't compete. A couple of other matches had to be scrapped. They had to be altered or whatever. Wellness policy, a couple of guys violated it, and yeah, it was just bad. So in order to write off the great Khali, they had him call out The Undertaker before the match. He didn't want to wait for the Punjabi prison match, and Big Show comes in and ambushes The Undertaker. Teddy, a couple of minutes later, puts Big Show in the match and pulls Khali out. So that's how it went. So the guy they made the entire match for is not going to compete. It's a shame that Khali wasn't going to compete, but then again, as bad as the match was for me on last viewing, it was probably way better than it would have gone down. Show and Taker ended up having way better matches 2 years later, and that's one thing to mention. Khali obviously had to interfere, and by the time he came out, The Undertaker was well on his way out. I might have to rewatch this one and see if I find some enjoyment. I might regret it. For some reason, the ending saw the cage break. I'm not sure if that was a botch. It probably wasn't. And Khali's climbing like an idiot. Big Show was starting to get burnt out at this point. I can't blame either of them for being that bad. It was a weird match concept that the WWE didn't even know what it was going to be. And so it felt awkward, I guess. but there was going to be a rubber match between Khali and The Undertaker very soon. On the August 4th episode of SmackDown, The Undertaker faced King Booker. During the match, Khali interferes. He stood tall, but Taker fought back with a flurry of punches, and he managed to get rid of the big guy. Then, he issued a challenge for SummerSlam, himself and Khali in a last man standing match. Opening SmackDown the following week, Daivari along with Khali gave their stance on the SummerSlam match, and for some odd reason, they declined. Michael Cole called them a bunch of cowards, and Daivari thought it was unnecessary for Khali to drop Taker once again. Then the lights went off, and he emerged. He wasn't waiting long and marched down to the ring for yet another brawl with the great Khali. This time, The Undertaker for the first time actually hit the chokeslam on him. Despite all this, the match wasn't going to happen, but a couple of minutes later, Teddy Long made the match not for SummerSlam, but for SmackDown next week. Now you might be wondering, why in the hell is this match pushed forward when the pay-per-view could have been a perfect place to settle it? Well, Khali was notorious for being the worst in-ring performer on SmackDown, and they didn't want to risk having a terrible match on SummerSlam. With SmackDown, they can edit his matches. Honestly, when I read that, I didn't think it was that bad. So it would have been a big issue had he injured himself on the pay-per-view or something like that. I don't know. JBL saying this was something right out of a Steven Spielberg movie, while I'm out here thinking it's something from the early 90s. Nonetheless, I thought this match was better than it had any right to be. Does that mean you should watch it? Go ahead, but don't blame me if you dislike it. You might like it though. But yeah, this might be in Khali's top 5 matches in WWE. The Undertaker really worked hard to get something out of this. He dominated in the beginning, but Daivari provided a distraction, a low blow, and Khali ends up throwing him off the stage. He almost loses the match, but manages to recover, and after the commercial break, Khali's in clear control. Taker took a hell of a lot of punishment, and at some points was even asking for it. Khali almost had the match won, count of 9, but Taker sat up and finally had some momentum on his side, but it was quickly gone though. Khali brings in the steps, but this would be his wrongdoing because The Undertaker uses them. Daivari comes in with a chair, knocked down, and the weapons really helped The Undertaker get some kind of an edge. Khali's bleeding, he swung like his life depended on it, and then he hit the choke slam. Ref counts, Taker rests, and the fans were counting along. Khali almost recovers but is unable to, and so The Undertaker was finally victorious. Yeah, that wasn't bad for me. The last man standing match really gave them freedom, especially Khali. It's not like I expect him to be Bret Hart or something, but his mobility issues really hurt him. This match, though, worked out some of those issues. You know, The Undertaker, he really tried his best throughout this program. Khali just had his problems performing. I ain't criticizing the guy himself. He had some knee issues, and it wasn't his fault. I will say, though, that as a kid, Khali for me was like this unstoppable force. I'm talking about before the Cena thing. Even though he lost this match, I guess it protected him well. The Undertaker in the kayfabe totem pole was probably at the very top, so despite losing, he looked pretty good out there. We're back to 2006. This was when Mr. Kennedy was Mr. Rising Star. They strapped a rocket on him due to his mic skills, talent, charisma. The little nuances made him stand out for me. He was a brash, unique talent. Sure, he wasn't the best in the ring, but this was back when it wasn't a huge priority to be an in-ring performer. MVP, on the other hand, was, again, brash, egotistical, very confident in storyline. It's a very great prospect to look back on at the time. I mean, you can't go wrong with MVP. He had the mic skills. The wrestling skills were there. You know, he had some entertaining matches with Matt Hardy and Chris Benoit. And again, he's one of those guys that should have been champion. Had he been world champion, I think he would have had a good run. Say in 2007, 2008, I think that would have been the excellent time to put the title on him. But unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be. Now, in regards to this feud, or these feuds, I remember watching SmackDown as a kid and just being entertained by these guys. Like, even though the matches weren't outstanding or anything like that, I still have fond memories of this whole program. This feud was supposed to be looked back on as a very important chapter in Kennedy's ascent to the top of WWE. Granted, he never made it there due to a misdiagnosed injury, but who says we can't look back on it? Okay, 2006. Mr. Kennedy at this point in time was probably the second biggest rising star on SmackDown behind Bobby Lashley. Things were working very well for one Mr. Kennedy. On the September 8th, 2006 episode of SmackDown, the United States Champion demanded competition. This was despite the fact that he beat a man that, as he claims, was a 6-time NCAA champion, 10-time Georgia powerlifting champion. Those credentials, they exist in a world where Ted DiBiase and Kurt Hennig won the WWF Championship. Basically, they're non-existent, and the guy looked like he was straight out of SVR 2008, but that's not the point. Kennedy decimated the opposition from the D-League of Pro Wrestling, and after the match, he called for the esteemed general manager Teddy Long to come out. He does just that, and the reason why the US champion wanted him out here was because he's got an announcement. What's that? Well, Kennedy's being the best of the best on SmackDown, and because of this, he figured that it's time to take his talents down to Raw. Theodore Long, of course, had an opponent for Kennedy in mind. I think you guys know who it is. It was going to be, at No Mercy, Mr. Kennedy versus The Undertaker. JBL and Cole go crazy, and that's the dance you do after ruining a heel's day. But with that said, Kennedy had barely scraped the surface yet. He's out here saying there's nothing on SmackDown. It's like if you ate at a couple pizza shops and you're like, I accomplished everything there is to do in the pizza world or something like that. 2 weeks later, on the September 29th episode of SmackDown, the Green Bay native decided to finally break his silence regarding The Undertaker. He wanted to honor the Phenom with a tribute after watching what he's capable of firsthand. Kennedy gave massive praise to the dead man, citing his lists of victories against the likes of Stone Cold, Kane, The Rock, all those guys. And basically, what Kennedy was trying to say is that he's accomplished everything and there's nothing to prove. Like, if you're going to go in the ring facing me, there's nothing to prove. Nada. Kennedy was very confident in his chances at No Mercy, but thought it'd be wrong for himself to intrude on and ruin The Undertaker's legacy. Hell, this guy was so confident in himself, saying, oh, I shouldn't even end the streak at WrestleMania. It shouldn't be me. And in essence, Mr. Kennedy didn't want to face The Undertaker. It's clear as day. Michael Cole was confused, but before much more can be said, the Phenom appeared. Kennedy was damn near pissing himself at the sight of The Undertaker, and he grabs a mic. He informs Mr. Kennedy of something important, that being, he will rest in peace. Simple as that. As The Undertaker turns his back, Kennedy, though, thought, why not, and made an attempt that went about as well as his main event push in WWE. He's just at a loss of words and just bolted the hell out of there, thinking to himself, what have I got myself into? Ahead of No Mercy, Mr. Kennedy addressed the Undertaker for one final time. The reason why I called him that is because he thought it was a bunch of hocus pocus, just some mind games. None of that stuff intimidated him, and all the tricks meant nothing because he wasn't scared. It was one of those baby faces, old, the heel is the new trendy young guy or whatever. It's simple. But Kennedy did a pretty good job here. Meanwhile, another outspoken wrestler on the SmackDown roster was trying to make a name for himself. After several weeks of Teddy Long pursuing this star, Montel Vontavious Porter finally signed with SmackDown. His character was a spoiled, overrated wrestler. Add to that, he was in kayfabe the highest paid wrestler in SmackDown history. The man had a little too much stock in himself, to the point where the commentary team had doubts over his actual abilities. His debut came on No Mercy when he destroyed a jobber by the name of Marty Garner. You may be familiar with him as the guy who took that wicked pedigree back in '96. JBL felt like he was scammed because the $200 Power Ranger was talking the talk, but ended up facing a guy who couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag. So of course, MVP was victorious in his debut. Now back to Taker Kennedy. Regarding their match, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't that good. You can watch it, but I assume you won't be thinking after a few months or years, damn, I gotta go watch that again. So let's give a quick summary of it. First of all, Kennedy was clearly intimidated. He was wising it up, trying to evade Taker's strikes, but it didn't work, and his arm was being worked on. It was clear that a number was done on him, but the rising star had flashes. He countered the old school, exposed the turnbuckle, hell, he even capitalized on little mistakes The Undertaker made. Because of this, he took total control, and even when the opposition began building momentum, he quickly bounced back. Also, that pile driver really caught me off guard. It was very rare to see somebody not named Taker Kane do it, and when you think about it, it showed just how much faith The Undertaker had in Mr. Kennedy in order to allow him to hit the pile driver. I mean, that move was being done by the veteran of the veterans, you know? Like HBK, Undertaker, Kane, those were the only guys that did it. The dead man managed to take back control in a slugfest, which JBL felt was unintelligent of Kennedy to engage in. Because of this, the Undertaker train was rolling, but Mr. Kennedy showed just how good he is, evading a chokeslam, a last ride, and even slammed the dead man into the steel. On the other side of the spectrum, the Undertaker was kicking out of everything Kennedy was dishing, and so the US champ brought in the title belt, and it ended up being used on him, causing the DQ. Taker stood tall after the tombstone, and it was a cheap finish. The match was just rolling, and it ended in a DQ, which is quite unfortunate. Kennedy was victorious though, and the feud was only just beginning. The next night on Raw, Kennedy got his ass beat in a failed attempt at getting his heat back. As for SmackDown, he called whatever that was at No Mercy a W, and it didn't matter to him if it was a DQ, it was a win. Add to that, Teddy Long refused to let him go. He decided to put his title on the line against a man Teddy claims he's never beaten. After that, he'll go off to Raw. Regarding that opponent, well, it was Chris Benoit, and JBL's like, welcome to hell. Oh man. The match itself was physical and hard-hitting, and just as Kennedy's in control, The Undertaker's music plays, he gets distracted, leading to a hat-trick of German suplexes before Benoit transitions into the crossface, forcing Mr. Kennedy to tap, and so there was no contract release. Back to MVP. Since Montel was such a superstar, he came out to SmackDown later that week demanding competition. JBL still cursing him, complaining about how he didn't get pyro in his entrances, let alone a damn sparkle. Speaking of that, WWE must have felt very bad for JBL that they spent their entire budget on one single entrance. Montel called that Marty Garner guy a dangerous individual, made it seem like that W was well fought. Then a Power Ranger chant intensified, which I found quite hilarious. He begged Teddy Long for some competition, you know, somebody that'll actually make him work a sweat, and Teddy Long's like, hold my mic. Just hearing that word competition gave him an idea. First of all, he indicated that after this match, MVP might not have teeth. Suddenly, the pyro goes out and it's Kane. Michael Cole shouted and he's on SmackDown, whatever. This was because he lost the Loser Leaves Raw match earlier that week to Umaga. MVP's like, what did I get myself into? And Marty Garner compared to Kane was just some third league team, whereas Kane was Liverpool or something. Despite this, MVP opted to fight. Ref was looking to call for the bell, but he decides to stretch and delay the match with some stupidity. Kane eventually grew impatient with these actions and decided to bring the fight. He bounced him from the barricade to apron, and Montel had to rake him in the eyes in order to bounce on out of there. Kane's debut on SmackDown, well, his return ended in a no contest, but it didn't matter. Why? Because he gets MVP again the following week. Montel called what happened last week scandalous nonsense. Why? Because he wasn't ready, and that ain't the case now. This time around, he actually brought the fight. Sure, he got his ass beat, but it was a start. That is until he tried running out there again. Despite this, MVP found a little opening, and it didn't really last long because he tried being flashy. Kane was looking to wrap it up, but he gets low blowed to win it by DQ. The way MVP was hyped and how he turned out after these few weeks, Jamarcus Russell-esque. Like, that guy just wasn't fulfilling that potential people saw in him at all. On the other side of things, Mr. Kennedy, he opted to return the favor from the previous week, but flopped harder than Brooke Hogan's music career, as the attack only served to bring out the intensity in The Undertaker. Unfortunately though, the obsession he had for going after the dead man caused him to get involved in MVP's business with Kane. Kennedy, for some odd reason, demanded The Undertaker in a match, knowing very well that he wasn't there, but what he got instead was a DQ match against his younger brother. MVP was apparently sick and couldn't compete, hence the replacement. As expected, Kane gave him a hard time. MVP had to interfere in order to assist Kennedy, and even then, Kane had the momentum by his side. As he goes for the chokeslam, MVP comes in and whacks that leg using a chair, giving the victory to Kennedy. It was a forced W, and this meant he had defeated 4 former world champions, that being Batista, Rey Mysterio, The Undertaker, and now Kane. In light of that controversial victory, Teddy Long booked a tag team match pitting MVP and Mr. Kennedy facing off against the returning Brothers of Destruction. It was the first time in 5 years that the two men got to team up. As for that match, well, it was a memorable SmackDown moment. Not for the action necessarily, but for the sight of seeing Kane and The Undertaker on the same side of the ring. About the match itself, JBL called MVP a Bud-like hand. Kane and Taker had yet to deliver some sustainable damage to the heels, but just when they start building momentum, those guys were like, screw it, opting to lose by countout. All of a sudden, the GM comes out, and seeing as he's a disciple of The Undertaker's, that's my conspiracy theory, the match was restarted. This time, though, Kennedy pulls an edge. He left MVP alone with the monsters in the ring, and he struggled as a result of this. Things were going so bad for him that Kennedy had to deliver a low blow in order to end this whole thing. But again, the play out of Friday nights made this a no DQ, no countout match. Oh man. JBL proceeded to go on a huge tirade against Teddy Long, calling him an accomplice. And wow, JBL of 06-07 was truly, and I mean truly, something else. He was crazy. The poor guys in the ring were just toys in this amusement park, but they managed to finally turn things around for a bit, working as a unit. Unfortunately though, neither working as a unit nor a low blow could stop the brothers, and the fans erupted upon the sight of the chokeslams, and even that wasn't it because The Undertaker hit the Tombstone Piledriver to beat Mr. Kennedy. Awesome moment. I love it because of the fact that the brothers hadn't been seen in nearly 5 years. They brought fury and intensity, and it was entertaining as hell. Even though Mr. Kennedy got his ass handed to him, it still didn't stop him from making yet another challenge. On the November 10, 2006 episode of SmackDown, Mr. Kennedy came out once again to issue a special kind of challenge to The Undertaker. He gave praise to the dead man for lasting 16 years in the ever-changing landscape of WWE, but had to brag about beating 4 world champions. Kennedy was so brave that he wanted Taker to answer the challenge in person, and like a bunch before him, he said that 1990 was the beginning of The Undertaker, but 2006 will mark the end. The Phenom wasn't going to decline the challenge. It's obvious as day, or in this case, night. Kennedy had some fear in him, but it wasn't outright. It's like he had to do it. Initially, he failed using the microphone as a weapon, but after multiple attempts, managed to bust the dead man open, leaving him a bloody heap. But then Taker grabbed him by the throat. Kennedy quickly shuts down a counterattack before standing atop a fallen dead man. JBL had loads and loads and loads of praise for Kennedy due to the fact that he came, he saw, he conquered. Simple as that. Shortly afterwards, a first blood match between the two was made for Survivor Series, and meanwhile, MVP was complaining about how Teddy Long abused his power. He said that he's been in street fights easier than whatever that match was, and because of this, Teddy Long booked him in a street fight against, you guessed it, Kane. Down in Manchester, JBL finally started to come around on MVP, and by March of 2007, he was his biggest supporter. As for the fight itself, Kane threw him around for his own enjoyment. He ends up getting pushed into the booth, and oh my god, did that look brutal. A few seconds later, end up tipping the freaking phone booth, busting MVP open. He just struggled to find a real opening at this point, and even after using a chair, it was a dominant performance from the Big Red Monster. After a while, he screwed up taking too long, leading to a DDT on Steel, and following the commercial break, MVP was officially in control. He rung Kane's bell, and it was looking real bad, but he set up. At least the Kane comeback, side slam, clothesline, all that, and when he decides to bring in some steel steps, Mr. Kennedy came to Montel's assistance. Distraction leads to a low blow, but steel step shot, and because of this, MVP was once again victorious. However, he couldn't celebrate for long because the Undertaker was here. You'd think Kennedy was ready for a fight, right? Well, he instead tossed his buddy to the Sharks. He was all fired up at this point, but opted to walk straight to the back. As a result of that attack from the previous week, Mr. Kennedy suddenly grew a big head, somewhat god complex. He's stating stuff like, sports entertainment last year was like a rudderless ship. He's talking about this new superstar that shined light on a wasteland, the savior, who I assume was Casey James. And the brash star was comparing his impact to that of Undertaker's in the early 90s. Talk about delusion. He brought the evidence from last week, the bloody microphone, before promising to win the first blood match at Survivor Series. To me, this is one of Mr. Kennedy's best damn promos. And the feud itself really brought out the best in him promo-wise. He was all kind of comedy beforehand, but now he was dead serious, and it just led to some very good television. As for MVP, Teddy Long disliked him so much that he booked him in a steel cage match against Kane. The poor guy just couldn't catch a break. Montel wasn't exactly focused on fighting Kane in the beginning, rather escape. He was being battered and beaten from each side of the cage with no end in sight, but unfortunately for the Big Red Monster, he got a little too ahead of himself and attempted to chokeslam him off the top rope. This gave MVP a huge opening as he managed to rake him in the eye, kick him off the ropes, and climb the hell out of there. Now he was actually starting to prove his worth. Despite the fact that MVP never won these matches clean, he was scoring W's. His relationship with Kennedy was of course still strained, but that didn't stop the loudmouth from thanking him and offering to have a clean slate. It was looking like the relationship was going well. Before I go into that, Mr. Kennedy at this point was so damn self-assured of himself being the victor of that first blood match. Add to that, he bragged about his previous victories, and in his mind, that was where the truth lied. Kennedy was continuously provoking the Undertaker, calling him a coward without saying the exact words themselves. It was a damn good promo. But the gong was heard in the arena, and the Undertaker was coming out. Kennedy stood his ground, he was ready for a fight, and he wasn't backing down, but Taker was 2 steps ahead of him. He decided to respawn in the middle of the ring, and the heel bolts. As Ken Kennedy's walking to the top of the ramp, the Undertaker's like, Survivor Series, first blood, and suddenly it's raining blood, red goo. I don't know what it is, but whatever, red stuff. I just love the confidence radiating from Kennedy. Obviously, he was a coward heel, but the work he was doing around this time was superb. Looking at him from the perspective of 2006, he was a surefire world champion in WWE. You'd bet money on it. Before the big match, MVP told Kennedy if he needed any help with the Undertaker, he'll be right there. Kennedy showed his intelligence by rubbing some Vaseline on his forehead, exposing a turnbuckle, preparing for the dead man. In the beginning, the former US champ failed to make any sort of good offense, and by the looks of it, the Vaseline strategy was working. Whenever he tried fighting back, Taker would quickly find a way out. Oddly enough, his tactic was to target the ribs, and JBL explained it as the Undertaker wanting Kennedy to suffer some sort of internal bleeding. And even when he bounced him off the turnbuckle, Kennedy didn't bleed, but he did bleed internally. MVP quickly took notice and brought in a towel, and he made it seem like they're going to the back, but he instead tossed his buddy back into the ring. This time around, Kennedy actually fought back. MVP then comes in with a chair and accidentally blasted the Undertaker, busting him open. Kennedy gets back up, delivers several blows to the dead man before Charles Robinson took notice of the blood, giving him the victory. Things were looking very well for one Mr. Kennedy. He grabbed the mic, tried to stick it to the Undertaker, but there was still some fight in him. JBL suggested he get the hell out of there, but he clearly didn't, and it resulted in a nasty-ass chair shot, which sounded like a damn gunshot. That chair shot in itself is top 5 most brutal from the 2000s in WWE probably. This concluded with a tombstone pile driver. Oh man. Match itself was just there. It didn't last as long as the No Mercy bout, but I like this one over their previous match, so there's that. Later that night, Kane and MVP went at it for all of 2 seconds during the Survivor Series elimination match. The only action involving the two saw Kane chokeslam Montel, leading to the 5-star frog splash, which eliminated the highest paid SmackDown star. Later that week, Teddy Long wanted to make Armageddon something special, so he booked that Inferno match between MVP and Kane. Not only that, but a last ride match between Taker and Kennedy. Regarding the two heels, Kennedy was very angry over what went down, questioning that "got my back" statement from MVP. They argued over who was responsible for that victory at Survivor Series before all of a sudden MVP said, "We could have helped each other against the Brothers of Destruction." Basically, MVP thought it was a shame that the relationship has come to this when they could have been helping themselves the entire time. Unfortunately for Montavious Porter, he had such a hard time with a dead man. At one point, he tried running, but Kennedy interferes and gets thrown into the ring himself. Kane comes in, they whoop their asses to send them running, and you know what this was leading to. The following week, Mr. Kennedy came out to discuss this last Friday match, and he refused to be distracted by the stipulation. It meant nothing to him because he's already beaten him twice, and the question shouldn't be, is he inside my head? Rather the contrary. He was doing all this talking, but once he saw the hearse moving, he began pissing himself. Michael Cole stuttering, JBL shouting, "Cars don't move by themselves." And of course, when the trunk was opened, The Undertaker emerged, signaling what's to come for Mr. Kennedy. Meanwhile, MVP was trying to escape that Inferno match, explaining how every time he wins, Teddy Long makes a matchup with the even more dangerous rules. He refused to compete, but Teddy's like, if you don't, your ass is fired. As for Mr. Kennedy, his match with Kane was looking bleak, but MVP caused the DQ. They jumped him, lights go out, and the big red monster disappeared. So Kennedy knows what's up and decides to run into the crowd. They didn't appear though, but they gave the heels a little warning. Despite all this going on, MVP tried getting his agent to do something about the Inferno match. He didn't want to be stressed with a tag match, Kennedy's coming up to him or whatever, and they were trying to explain their situation, making it seem worse than the other. But in the end, they compromised and got on the same page in order to best the Brothers' destruction. Regarding the match, same story. Just as Kane and Taker try wrapping things up, MVP saves his partner, leading to a brawl on the outside. Kennedy managed to DDT Kane on the rep and attempted to run him down, but suddenly the lights go out, but when they're back on, Kennedy's like, damn it, it's him, and he hops his ass on out of there. As if that wasn't bad enough, Kane sat up, and so the stage was set for both men. They were set to face their worst fears for one final time. Okay, I just want to say I'm biased towards this pay-per-view. I watched it like a million times as a kid, so it ranks as one of my favorites. I even reviewed it about a year and a half ago. It's clearly not as well refined as my current reviews, but just wanted to mention it. For months, MVP had been avoiding Kane. It didn't matter what match was booked, he'd find a way. Kennedy for months had been bragging about beating The Undertaker, but again, it was always with some sort of external help, being a title belt or MVP. Okay, first up, the Inferno match. Poor MVP stood no chance. They even lined up a stretcher for him. As expected, the match itself was limited in what the guys could do. I don't think anybody went into this thinking, oh, it's going to be a classic, because if anything previous Inferno matches taught us is that the moment they fight on the outside is when it gets good. Unfortunately, in MVP's case, he was burned. What I find funny in all of this is the fact that WWE literally did worse than this earlier this year, despite the fact that they're PG. JBL's fuming on commentary, placing Teddy Long responsible for this chaos, and in his eyes, the SmackDown GM was a sadistic man who didn't prioritize his talent. This would be addressed in a very underrated promo from SmackDown later that week. Now one down, one to go. Mr. Kennedy and The Undertaker last ride. This one in particular is my favorite of the series, but again, bias. They gave them an awesome promo with the end is near playing, and we all knew how this was ending. Let's talk about the action first. As expected, Mr. Kennedy struggled right in the beginning. The Undertaker was throwing him around, and he couldn't gain any substantial offense. But at that moment's notice, he almost stole the match. That happened again a few minutes later, and it showed that Kennedy was no slouch. It wasn't until he got a hold of a chair that Kennedy became Mr. Offense. He led Taker to the top of the Armageddon structure, and it led to the dead man being thrown off there. The commentary team thought that the match was over, it was done with. He tossed him into the hearse, but the Undertaker sat up and dragged Ken to the outside. Flurry of punches from him, repeated chair shots busted open SmackDown's rising star, and if that wasn't enough, The Undertaker chokeslammed him on top of the hearse before wrapping it up with a tombstone pile driver, and that's all she wrote. Not a bad match in my opinion. Some feel Kennedy didn't benefit from this feud, but I see it as a good thing. He was elevated to a certain level in feuding with The Undertaker. They valued him. Also, one thing to mention is that The Undertaker defended Kennedy from others in the locker room and even went as far as to choose him as the guy for him to feud with. Kennedy ended up challenging for the world title afterwards, and while it would have been cool to see him win the feud, it did anything but hurt him. Regardless of the fact that he lost the feud, Kennedy actually beat The Undertaker twice, so there's that. As for MVP, I thought the feud itself was fun. He gained heat literally and figuratively, and it showed just how much they valued him by having Kane work with him. It helped him gain some knowledge and established MVP as a star to watch following Armageddon. In the storyline, he earned JBL's respect after, for one, stealing those victories, and two, for getting burnt at Armageddon and coming back after only a few weeks. So yeah, I enjoyed this story. I enjoyed the other one as well. I want to know what you guys think in the comments down below. In January of 2007, Batista was world champion while The Undertaker was starting to hit his stride. Those angle matches really showed us what Taker was capable of in the ring. His physique was probably at its peak around this time period, and I don't think there was a point in his career that he was better all around other than 2007. As for how this feud began, first of all, they were teasing this match before the Royal Rumble. The Undertaker had accidentally booted Batista on the final SmackDown for the Rumble. He was intending to hit Kennedy, but the loudmouth ducked. Batista obviously took this to heart. At the Royal Rumble, The Undertaker finally won the namesake match. He bested the hometown hero Shawn Michaels in order to punch his ticket to WrestleMania 23.
He was in the company for 16 years up to this point, and he finally achieved this goal. Over the next week, The Undertaker sent a message to both the WWE and ECW champions. A little side note, imagine Taker going for the ECW championship. Seriously though, if there was a time to do Cena and Taker, WrestleMania 23 was probably the best time. As for Batista though, he was impatient. He straight up entered the ring on that week's SmackDown and just called out The Undertaker. Just as The Undertaker came out, well, he didn't come out. It was John Cena instead. John Cena also wanted to know the decision, and just like Batista, he wanted to prepare very early on for the most important match of his life. Suddenly, The Undertaker finally appeared, and he stared at both champions, and when things couldn't get any crazier, freaking Shawn Michaels appeared. Oh yeah, I remember this episode. The fact that HBK and John Cena appeared on SmackDown at the same time, it blew my mind at the time. Shawn Michaels was here to get an answer from The Undertaker. He was desperate to get that Cena match at WrestleMania, and then Vince came out and he booked John Cena and Shawn Michaels in a match against Batista and The Undertaker at No Way Out. On that week's Raw, The Undertaker finally made his decision regarding WrestleMania. Just as he was about to choose John Cena, he chose Batista. He signaled his intentions and decided to chokeslam the champion. As for Batista, he refused to let that one slide. He did, however, keep his ego in check for the No Way Out match. As for that match, it's not an all-time great, but for some reason, it's one of my favorite matches of the 2000s. Maybe it's because of the star power, and yes, I've seen matches that were way better than this one during the decade, but I'll take this one over many of them. Was it because of the Staples Center crowd? Was it the contrasting styles? Was it because of JBL's commentary? I don't know. One thing that's for certain is that this was fun. I recommend you watch it. It's not a classic by all means, but you'll probably enjoy it if you watch it. Anyways, near the end, Taker and Batista had all the momentum. And just as Taker was going to wrap it up, Batista turned on him by hitting the Spine Buster. This left The Undertaker to a Shawn Michaels sweet chin music and a John Cena FU, costing himself and his WrestleMania opponent the match. So payback is a bit. On the February 23rd, 2007 episode of SmackDown, Batista explained why he turned on The Undertaker at No Way Out. His reasoning, well, first of all, he has a lot of respect for The Undertaker, but he cannot apologize for what he did, and if it gets ugly, then so be it. And sure, he does respect The Undertaker, but he doesn't intimidate him. As a matter of fact, if he was intimidated by The Undertaker, then that's conduct unbecoming of the world champion. That's what he said. He said that he plans on walking into WrestleMania as champion and walking out as champion. So at this point, WWE had Batista be babyface number 2, I guess, because he was getting some boost from the crowd. He wasn't a heel or anything like that. He was just a face, a babyface with an edge. Unlike The Undertaker, we all know how he is. The following week, The Undertaker responded, but just before that happened, Batista reiterated what he said the previous week. Sure, it's an honor to face The Undertaker at WrestleMania. He knows that it's going to get ugly and it's going to be the match of his career. But he's got to stress this. He respects The Undertaker, the utmost respect he has for him, but he refuses to be intimidated. Then we hear a gong and the lights go out. All of a sudden we see The Undertaker paying a visit to the graveyard. He was digging a grave, perhaps Batista's, and he let him know that WrestleMania will be hell for him and he will rest in peace. Batista, though, he showed no fear. Heading into WrestleMania, the Animal Batista was very confident that he's ending the streak. Taker, he showed no weakness either. He had so much momentum heading into the event, and basically those two were heading into a collision course. On the final SmackDown before WrestleMania, and this was after Taker turned on Batista during that Raw tag match earlier that week, both men stood in the same ring at the same moment. This moment, it was like a ticking time bomb. You knew they were going to fight, and this was going to escalate quickly. Teddy Long demanded that they don't physically provoke each other, and Batista said that after the mind games Taker's played on him over the last couple of weeks, he lost respect for the dead man. He gave us an emphatic no. The Undertaker, or in Teddy's words, Mr. Undertaker, responded with silence. Teddy asked Batista what's it going to take to beat the dead man, and the champion simply responded, 48 hours. He promised to whoop the dead man's ass, and then the challenger for the title took off his jacket and they brawled. The $2 security tried to separate them, but they failed miserably. Now, I assume if you weren't sold on the match, now you were. This was an all-out brawl between two men, and what can I say? I got you hyped for the main event of WrestleMania. In the end, though, Batista managed to hit a devastating spine buster. Taker sat up afterwards, and man, was it electric. Batista was shouting 48 hours while Taker preferred to speak with his actions. As for the WrestleMania 23 match, hot damn, what can I say? One of the best big man matches. They had a chip on their shoulders knowing that they had to prove everyone else wrong, and I'd say this match was when Batista hit his stride as an in-ring performer. Before this match, he was struggling to regain form, but after this match, he managed to click in the ring and he was even better than he previously was. This match had a bunch of moments, and you can go check out this video for the match analysis. They just went out there and it was a ridiculously amazing match. It seemed like Batista had Taker scouted. They went back and forth. They hit their signature moves. They kicked out of those moves. And in the end, it was The Undertaker who who was victorious. It was incredibly dramatic. I cannot stress it enough that it was definitely a classic. Was it my favorite match of the night? Shockingly, no. But the match really stole the show. Like, they definitely deserved to main event, but there were other plans on this night. I guess they didn't want it to end like WrestleMania 13. I don't even know. Okay, so now the Dead Man was 15-0, and he was finally the new World Heavyweight Champion. Overall, a very memorable match, and it was explosive, it was intense, it was dramatic, it was epic. Simply put, it was epic, and if they went another 5 to 10 minutes, it might have been one of the best WrestleMania matches ever. Still is, though. Amazing storytelling, incredible action, and you get a classic match. I said it beforehand, I'll say it again. On the April 6, 2007 episode of SmackDown, The Undertaker came out to chat about his match or compete with King Booker, I'm not sure which one, when Batista interrupted. The Animal walked in exasperated fashion. He was really pissed off that he lost the title. He simply entered the ring, and he said these words: "Congratulations, I would like my rematch now." He said something along the lines of that. That's all. That's what he said. He said those couple of words, and he walked out of there. Then King Booker from out of nowhere struck. This would come back to bite him as Taker tombstoned him on top of the announce table. R.I.P. King Booker. Seriously though, I believe he had issues with his wife during that night, and he wanted to like make an impact in order to get back. I don't even know. Maybe he's becoming irrelevant on Smack. I don't even know. Like I said, Batista didn't come out to complain, wow, my baby. Nope, he just simply asked for the rematch and left. Over the next couple of weeks, both men teamed up with one another. As for the Backlash match, it was last man standing, and once again, I cannot stress it enough, these guys could do no wrong on pay-per-view. Story of the match, these guys could barely keep each other down for the 3 count at WrestleMania. Now they have to keep each other down for the 10 count. The match itself was tremendous. The Animal had issues with his right leg. It felt like a war. They went back and forth. Batista hits a spear. He hits 2, no 3 spine busters, but Taker was resilient. The Dead Man responded with a chokeslam, and man, it wasn't even the match of the night in my opinion. Yet, if it happened any other night, it would definitely be. The bad leg was hindering Batista's performance, but it didn't hurt him in the long run. He speared The Undertaker right off the stage, and it was a mess, in a good way. The ref counted to 10, and I know everyone hates these kinds of endings, and rightfully so, but this feud was going to continue, so was this the only choice? I mean, it seriously made Batista look on par with The Undertaker, so that's a good thing. Overall, another enjoyable match, and you're better off just watching their whole collection of matches on the network. Seeing as Teddy Long made the 3rd match official for next week, Batista came out to speak about the steel cage match on that week's SmackDown. He was getting some boost from the crowd who clearly favored The Undertaker. He said that at Backlash, he and The Undertaker pushed themselves to the limit. Neither one of them was able to answer the 10 count though, and due to the result, nothing was resolved. He said that when he was under that rubble, he asked himself, like, was the title worth it? Batista's answer, well, this is what he said. He said that if he could have, he would have stepped out of his body and slapped himself for thinking of such a stupid question. He was ready to do this again despite his body hurting because it was worth it in his eyes. He claimed that he's regaining the title and he left. The Undertaker responded later that night stating that he took Batista's right to the world title and he let him know that next week he will show no remorse, no mercy, and when it's all said and done, Batista will rest in peace. As for that steel cage match, I remember watching it when it aired. It was once again dramatic, entertaining, and sure, it was probably weaker than the other matches, but I was really into it. It seemed like Batista had the title in his grasp, but he blew the biggest lead of 2007, and we had to wait a couple of minutes to see just who won the match. They showed us a split screen of both men landing to the ground, and they said it was a draw, although you could see The Undertaker landed beforehand. Then Mark Henry came out and he attacked The Undertaker. He unleashed hell on the Dead Man, and after hitting the splash, this piranha comes out. Even JBL himself, who was a heinous heel, a remorseless villain, thought it was unethical of Edge to come out here and cash in that briefcase. My mindset back then, I really hated Edge, so seeing him cash in the briefcase after stealing it from Kennedy, I freaking hated this guy like no one else. Taker, though, managed to kick out twice, and Edge had to resort to the spear. 1, 2, 3, Edge is a SmackDown champion. Anyways, Henry during this time period was somewhat a major player, but he wasn't doing much. If there was one moment where he could have been world champion, it was this match. But it makes sense why he didn't go through with it. I mean, the last 2 champs were injured, and they didn't want a third. But Khali holding the title upside down is still the funniest thing ever. One thing to note is that Henry signed a 10-year contract back in 1996. It was renewed for 1 year, 2007, and it was set to expire in the fall of 2007. The expectations was Henry was a goner, so they're going to make the best out of him before he departs. That's by main eventing Unforgiven against The Undertaker. In the weeks leading to the event, Mark destroyed a bunch of jobbers, including Corey Graves, Eugene, The Undertaker drew it. He failed at attacking him because he just disappeared, and Taker was playing mind games with him. So he decided to play his own on the final SmackDown before Unforgiven. He mocked Taker's hocus pocus, and he claimed that the dead man's power pales in comparison to his. And he doesn't need hocus pocus because his power is reality or something like that. And the dead man struck once again. A video package played of the Undertaker in some cave saying the word Unforgiven, and Henry showed fear. Lightning struck in the arena, and the Undertaker's voice echoed throughout the arena, and he informed Mr. Henry that he's going to rest in peace. Now, about their match of Unforgiven, I find it weird how they main evented, but it is what it is. Heading into the match, Henry agreed to terms on a new contract, so he's going to remain in the company. The assumption was that he was going to retire, but that wasn't the case. Anyways, the match wasn't memorable, and there was no way in hell that Henry was going to come out winning. It had more of a SmackDown main event feeling to it rather than pay-per-view main event feeling, in my opinion. Mark, though, was resilient, and he wasn't going to go down without a well-fought battle. The Undertaker actually had to hit the last ride in order to win the match. At this point, The Undertaker returned and he wanted back his title. Batista gladly accepted even though the match wasn't official. Eventually, it was made for Cyber Sunday. Batista versus The Undertaker for the World Heavyweight Championship. Seeing as there was a vote for whom the special referee will be, JBL decided to try and convince the crowd to vote for him instead of Mick Foley or Stone Cold Steve Austin. The Birmingham, England crowd wasn't feeling him though, and he insulted their national team. JBL's paying tribute to himself when Batista interrupted. He heard enough and he decided to start that interview right now. So JBL at this point, he's bragging about leading the vote for WWE.com when Batista just stopped him there and straight up told him that if you're the ref, stay out of my way. JBL then said that the problem isn't going to be him, it's going to be Batista himself because he's a loser basically. JBL asked if Batista's ever beaten The Undertaker, and he then mentioned, and he said that he read this on Batista's book, an excerpt that basically described Batista's opinion about The Undertaker. Batista's opinion from the book was that he just wanted to be in the same room as him. Like, he had so much respect for The Undertaker that he'd really be happy to just be in the same room as him. Batista, though, denied being afraid of The Undertaker, and JBL left. But not before calling Batista a coward. This stopped Batista dead in his tracks, and he decided to respond with a spear. JBL's mouth, like, it's still getting him into fights despite being a color commentator. As for Batista's mindset, first of all, he believed JBL had it coming. And once again, whoever the ref's gonna be, they should stay out of his way. He once again let us know that he isn't afraid of The Undertaker. Sure, he's never beaten him, but there's a first time for everything. JBL continued to ask the fans to vote for him, and he promised to screw over Batista if he wins the vote. When The Undertaker came out, JBL demanded that the dead man wear his t-shirt. Taker didn't wear his shirt, and JBL threatened him, but this would backfire as The Undertaker delivered a thunderous chokeslam. Then Batista came out, and we were hyped for this one. The two stood face to face, and just as The Undertaker stared at the belt, Batista delivered a vicious spear. Now, there was certainly a lot of hype for the rematch. As for the winner of that vote, before I get to a little side note, I remember as a kid I voted for Mick Foley. Yeah, I chose Mick Foley. If that vote happened today, I obviously would have chose Stone Cold Steve Austin. But back then, I don't even know what the hell was going through my mind. The winner of that vote was, well, first of all, JBL entered the ring and he was certain that he won the vote. Then Mick Foley came out and they brawled. But before they did, the results came in and Mick Foley didn't win. JBL didn't win. And it was Stone Cold Steve Austin who was the special referee. Stone Cold then came out and he stunned Foley. And JBL then unloaded on a Texas Rattlesnake. But he failed in his efforts and got a Stone Cold Stunner. As for the main event, this match, I really enjoyed it more than the previous matches. It wasn't even better, but they were the main events. They just went out there and had a good match. I personally believe this is a very overlooked main event. Why did I like this match more than the WrestleMania 23 match? Well, first of all, they main evented the pay-per-view. They once again told a great story. Austin was the referee. Batista was in his hometown of Washington, D.C. And that conclusion, that ending, I loved it. It was similar to the WrestleMania 23 match in general, but those things factor into this being my favorite match of the feud. It was high drama, high stakes, the crowd was into it, the near falls were awesome, and in the end, Batista had to hit 2 Batista bombs to win the match. He finally beat The Undertaker clean. That's what I like. There was no shenanigans, no false finishes, nothing. He beat The Undertaker clean on pay-per-view. Like, how many people get to do that? I know Khali was probably the last guy to do it before Batista, but still, it's an accomplishment to beat The Undertaker on pay-per-view in the main event. So all in all, a match I recommend you watch if you haven't. If you enjoyed the previous matches, then I assume you like this one. It was pretty similar yet different due to a couple of things. On the November 2nd, 2007 episode of SmackDown, Batista was out here to talk about the epic match at Cyber Sunday. He said that he accomplished something that he believed he may never do, and that was beat The Undertaker. He said that it's 2-2 now. They had 2 draws and 1 victory apiece. And he believes that this wasn't over just yet. The Undertaker from out of nowhere appeared and he said that he's got Batista's back in their tag team match later that night. He declared his intentions once again. He wanted the world title. Batista asked if he wanted a rematch, and he accepted. As Batista walked away, The Undertaker said 4 words: Hell in a Cell. So the stage is set. Survivor Series, November 19th, Miami, Florida. Batista versus The Undertaker. Hell in a Cell for the World Heavyweight Championship. Okay, this one truly felt like a big deal. I'd say it's in my top 10 cell matches. I believe this was also the last cell match to feature blood. Yeah, it was probably the last cell match to feature blood. And the matches that followed this, they didn't feature blood, and if they did, it was accidental. In the beginning, it was at a methodical pace, but once they broke free, it was wild. Steel steps, signature moves, kickouts, a Batista bomb through the table that wasn't even enough, a tombstone on top of the steel steps. It was very dramatic. And when things couldn't get any crazier, Edge paid a visit to his good friend The Undertaker and blasted him with a camera. The fans were booing, and the Rated R Superstar delivered a vicious concerto to the dead man. Batista was dragged right on top of The Undertaker, and he ended up retaining the title. So that's the feud. The Batista and Undertaker feud was great. It had amazing storytelling, awesome matches, tremendous competitors, and overall, I'd say it was the best feud of 2007. What do you guys think? Comment down below. What do you think of this feud? I personally thought it really helped Batista's career, and it made him look even more legit than he previously was. And what can I say? The best set of matches Batista had in WWE, they were against The Undertaker, I'd say. Also, Yeah. I'd say The Undertaker was Batista's best opponent in WWE, not Triple H.
The Rated R Superstar is facing some long-term ramifications from his actions at Survivor Series. It's just nobody knew that these ramifications were anything but terrible. Vicky Guerrero scolded Edge and decided to punish him by giving him a World Heavyweight Championship match. He almost couldn't understand this, but ended up revealing that Vicky played a part in his return at Survivor Series, and this man was all up in her face like her name was Lita. Maybe the red hair fooled him, I don't know. But this decision to pair Edge and Vicky added another dimension to this ultimate opportunist character. In doing so, and once again reiterated the fact that Edge would stoop to any level to get what he wanted. And because he was such a compelling character at the time, being able to be this slimy heel, he was rewarded with an even stronger presence on the show. World title is better than anything in the world, so there's that. The world champion Batista couldn't understand why Edge deserves a title shot, and the reasons Vicky gave were weaker than Edge's spear. Later that night, the Rated R Superstar hosted the Cutting Edge, with his guest being Batista. He asked the fans if it was great to see him again, and they booed. I mean, what the hell do you expect? Your name is Edge. You piss off everyone else. For once, he actually gave credit to somebody for his success, and that was Vicky. Edge also revealed that he had planned this for 4 months, and the culmination was him winning the World Heavyweight Championship. Batista was fuming. I don't know if it's because he's wearing the oversized super duper band-aid on his head, or the fact that Edge and Vicky were plotting. He told Edge to shut up, and straight up said that it makes him sick to see these two. It makes me sick too. Every time they pop up on the screen, I want to look in another direction. And this is when Edge said that he held resentment and bitterness over seeing Batista hold his World Heavyweight Championship. Batista said that he doesn't deserve the title, but he'll deserve the beating, and shoved him before leaving. Then The Undertaker came out and Edge sprinted out of there. You'd be thinking he finally heard about the Wingstop Pistons promo. Vicky, though, was stuck, and The Undertaker made sure to send the Rated R Superstar a message with a tombstone pile driver. Now, this was a situation turned on its head. Edge, of course, had a plan, but also felt annoyed that the fans never checked up on him when he was injured. He claimed to contemplate retirement, all because he was going to come back to a company that didn't appreciate him. But then Vicky Guerrero called him. He knew it was for selfish reasons to help SmackDown, but as they started talking, he saw her as a supporting figure and said a corny line. Sometimes you can't help who you fall in love with. At least in his case, he fell in love with someone who had power. Him hiding as a cameraman was Vicky's idea, and taking out The Undertaker, he knew he could beat Batista. Now, for storyline purposes, Edge had grown as a problem in Batista's career. A man that went from being Triple H 3 times in a row, turned into the Dallas Cowboys, playoff Dallas Cowboys, anytime he met Edge. But with that said, Edge promised to destroy The Undertaker for what he did to Vicky. He dedicated the match to Vicky and promised to win the World Heavyweight Championship. As expected, Batista was a tough challenge. The Undertaker, though, made his presence felt and cost him the match. Teddy Long, the assistant GM, came out and gave Edge a rematch, but made it a triple threat match, including The Undertaker for Armageddon. The Undertaker was given the title match as a punishment, similar to how Vicky gave Edge his title shot. Teddy Long questioned Edge's motives towards Vicky and told him that the match at Armageddon is still happening. Edge complained about Teddy having something out for him and making him relinquish the title before 30 days, which was something WWE usually did, you know. If you can't compete in storyline, you have to relinquish the title. While it was annoying for Edge to be involved with all this, it wasn't all bad. Batista accidentally speared The Undertaker, adding more drama to their rivalry. Vicky returned the following week, all traumatized from the incident. Edge wanted to avenge her, but didn't want to have a match to do it. It was a tough challenge. 54 overall Funaki. Edge won obviously, but Vicky was out here booking like it was GM mode, giving Batista a freaking last man standing match against Kane, and The Undertaker a handicap match against these two. Edge cost Batista the match against Kane, and Taker managed to overcome the two big guys. They attacked him after the match, and Edge stood tall to end the show on top. Decent build. It was all about establishing Edge's motives to reclaim his world championship. His methods were somewhat unconventional, trying to gain power by getting with the GM of SmackDown, and anything but a win would render the story pointless. So you know they had to book Edge as the winner here. Especially because it was about The Undertaker getting redemption and finally overcoming Edge, who was one step ahead of him throughout this entire feud. The match itself was good. This was right before Batista hit his peak as an in-ring performer. Maybe you can say he did, but regardless, this was his best era in-ring. Edge managed to win the title in a unique way though. This guy brought out some clones and took advantage of a situation to win the World Heavyweight Championship for the second time. That was a weird-ass moment, seeing these two lookalikes come out. They always booked them to have these crazy-ass ideas, to get a single moment to take advantage and win a title. It was crazy. With the Royal Rumble coming up, a beat-the-clock challenge was made. Rey Mysterio was the last man to get the chance to potentially win the whole thing, but his opponent was Edge. He was the biggest threat, so Edge took matters into his own hands. This didn't work the way Edge wanted it to. The Undertaker and Batista came out and cost him the match, leading to Rey Mysterio winning the title shot. The Undertaker, meanwhile, won the SmackDown Elimination Chamber to win the right to challenge the Rated R Superstar at WrestleMania. Edge called himself a predator, an opportunist, and to him, ending the streak was a great opportunity. He claimed he was like The Undertaker being undefeated at WrestleMania. WWE just tried to use Edge's singles WrestleMania run as a way to compare both men, because Edge lost at WrestleMania 23, so he wasn't undefeated anymore. Edge said, unlike the fans, he takes his opportunities. That's why he's champion. The question of who will beat The Undertaker has been asked for 15 years. They've all fallen one by one. Edge said he won't fail. He'll be the one to end the streak. All of a sudden, the lights go out and The Undertaker came out. The dead man went after all three members of La Familia and set the champion running. The following week, The Undertaker called out Edge and his guys to have a match. He was talking about the match with Zack Ryder. Taker had just taken out Big Daddy V, so this was a tough challenge. At least for Ryder, not for The Undertaker. Ryder actually managed to stay in the match, but Undertaker wrapped it up. Hawkins and Edge come in and try to take him out, but failed. The Undertaker just started using a triangle choke submission hold, and everybody that was locked in couldn't get out of the hold. In an effort to combat The Undertaker, Vicky Guerrero booked a handicap match between The Undertaker and La Familia. At the same time, though, he got into some drama with Ric Flair. Edge's plan didn't work. He managed to beat The Undertaker and prove that he can get it done. With that said, Edge and Ric Flair faced off in a handicap match. Edge had a lot of help by his side, whereas Flair had Shawn Michaels. The steel cage match was chaotic. The Undertaker came in and once again took out a bunch of guys. Edge made a run for it, and The Undertaker was still using his new submission hold, Hell's Gate, to take out others. Edge finally took advantage of him and managed to drop him with a concerto. On the final SmackDown before WrestleMania, Edge held a funeral for The Undertaker's WrestleMania streak. The World Champion gave a speech about the streak and said he'll bury him and the streak. Edge was determined to eclipse The Undertaker's streak. He was driven by being the one to accomplish this. They played a video package of Edge breaking the streak, and he went on talking about how Vicky is the love of his life. The Undertaker came out from the casket and went on the attack. Number 1, never have a wedding in wrestling. Number 2, never have a closed casket in the middle of the ring. He chokeslammed Edge into the casket, took out La Familia, and gave everyone a sign of what's to come at WrestleMania. Okay. Edge's fixation on ending the streak has brought him down a path that many have walked through. They all failed. The Undertaker answered and overcame every challenge ahead and left a path of destruction. 15 tries and they all failed. Few of them have actually overcame The Undertaker himself, but never on the stage of WrestleMania. Edge believed he was the one due to his own undefeated streak in combination of being an opportunist and lucky. It served Edge well throughout his entire career. Why can't it work this time around at WrestleMania? This was Edge's first main event at WrestleMania and SmackDown's first main event in 5 years. The match itself was amazing. We're not going to try to make it seem like this match is good. It was actually great. Edge was one step ahead of Taker throughout it and showed great composure. In his eyes, he had the advantage because Taker never beat him. He found out that the challenger had a significant amount of resiliency. Edge was countering everything, but The Undertaker was constantly kicking out. Since this wasn't working, Edge used the camera when the ref got knocked down, and Charles Robinson had to run down from WrestleMania 23 itself or something to get to the ring right when The Undertaker hit the Tombstone Piledriver. Edge, though, kicked out at 2. Hawkins and Ryder came in, took a chokeslam, and Edge capitalized with a spear. 1, 2, no. He hit another one, but The Undertaker locked in Hell's Gate. Edge was desperately trying to reach the ropes, but he couldn't. He was gasping for air, moving all around, flopping around like a fish on land. But he couldn't get out of the hold. He couldn't escape and tapped out. New champion. The Undertaker finally overcame the Rated R Superstar and regained the World Heavyweight Championship. 16-0 at WrestleMania. There was a lot of things special with this match. Edge knew he had a lot riding on this main event and being trusted to go out there with The Undertaker and have a great match. It main evented over Flair and HBK, the Triple Threat WWE Championship match, and Floyd versus Big Show. I think we gotta run back this entire WrestleMania. I haven't watched it in about 7 years. Now, even though Edge was a heel and somebody that already did well for himself at the time, WWE somewhat considered having him end the streak. Here's what he had to say in an interview, and I quote, "In the lead up to it, I was asked, what do you think about ending the streak? And I said no," Edge said. "Adamantly no. I don't think it ever should have ended until what we knew it was his final WrestleMania. And then even no. I just didn't think it was right. At this point, it was like the streak was never gonna end." Later that week, Edge kicked off SmackDown in a state of anger. He lost the most important thing in his life, and no, it isn't Vicky Guerrero. It was the world title. Edge felt like he let the family down and apologized to Vicky before promising on his faithfulness to her that he will reclaim the World Heavyweight Championship. Later that night, Kane faced his brother, The Undertaker. Both men took titles from Chavo and Edge, so Vicky wanted them to go at it. La Familia ruined the match, but this all didn't work, and the Brothers of Destruction managed to overcome the heels and drop them with a tombstone piledriver. Edge decided to calm down a bit after this and had a day at the spot. The Undertaker, though, was much busier dealing with Festus and Batista the following week. The Animal and the Dead Man were far too competitive, and after touching Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder, who were in the crowd, Vicky Guerrero decided to book a match for the World Heavyweight Championship between the two. On the final SmackDown before Backlash, Edge was hyped to watch the main event. Bam Neely was brought in as a member of La Familia, around this time being the enforcer of the group, as other than Edge, these guys didn't have that tough guy element about them. Even Edge didn't. His stature, though, was much different to the other guys. With that said, Edge was very interested in Backlash. As to the main event, it was no holds barred. These two destroyed each other, and after Shawn Michaels interfered, The Undertaker won the match. This was a dull build, very dry, because Edge and The Undertaker didn't really interact much, and they mostly relied on the story of having Taker go through these tough challenges. I think the biggest problem was that the stakes didn't feel so high because their previous match had everything going for it. WrestleMania, the streak, the fact that Undertaker never really got one over Edge. Whereas here, everything that happened at WrestleMania wasn't here. With that said, the match was decent. The story involved Edge working them back and slowing down the pace. This worked into his favor, but eventually the match picked up. The Undertaker was jumping off the top rope, there was interference drama, and of course Edge fell short to the triangle choke. He put up more of a fight, but it wasn't enough. The Undertaker's hold was becoming a dangerous one in WWE. Edge took so much damage that he was stretched out of there, and this was becoming a noticeable pattern that Vicky Guerrero made sure to take advantage of. Later that week on SmackDown, The Undertaker was forced to defend the World Heavyweight Championship against the Great Khali. Vicky Guerrero came out right before the match started and said that chokeholds are illegal in WWE, and this move is just that. He's damaged many wrestlers. She threatened him if he used that hold again, but she stripped him of the World Heavyweight Championship. The Great Khali came out to take the title away from him, but he was more washed than 2011 Shaq, so Undertaker dropped him and locked Hell's Gate. Going against what Vicky said, Hawkins and Ryder, though, managed to steal the title, and once he realized what happened, he was fuming. The following week, Vicky gave The Undertaker a match for the title at Judgment Day, but he couldn't use his illegal chokehold. His opponent was to be determined in a battle royal between former champions. Batista overcame everyone only to face a fresh Edge who was brought in. It's always Batista. The Undertaker, though, sent a message. But man, looking back, this guy Edge used to piss me off. Every week he'd find a way to overcome something and do it in the slimiest way. The Rated R Superstar said that he managed to get cleared right before the match and said he'll beat The Undertaker. The same man that can't beat him without an illegal chokehold. Teddy Long, though, rained on his parade. Since Vicky couldn't show up to a meeting, Teddy did. He was asked to tell her that since her relationship with Edge has been interfering with the SmackDown roster, she has to compete in a match. So she fired him. Well, actually, he quit. Then he revealed that her opponent is The Undertaker. There it is. That's the one. That's where the meme came from. There it is. There's the image, finally. Vicky, though, she changed it to a 6-on-1 handicap match and brought out everyone. These two walked out. The Undertaker was putting in the work and almost chokeslammed Vicky, but Edge hit his spear and they ran away. This build was much better. Vicky and Edge were exploiting any potential loophole for even the slightest chance of getting one over The Undertaker, taking away his move and stripping his title. The mental mind games weren't really working, however. Edge had delusionally thought that he was on a more even playing ground. It also planted the seeds for a potential end involving Vicky and Edge's corrupt dealings coming face to face with the board of directors. The match at Judgment Day was exciting. It was a bit better than Backlash. It was much more dramatic. However, the result was controversial. The Undertaker had the match won by countout when Vicky Guerrero came out and said that the title can change hands by pinfall or submission, not by countout or disqualification. So The Undertaker hasn't won the title. He dropped Edge with the tombstone piledriver after hearing this, and she called him a SOB. So this feud continues. The Undertaker was constantly having the deck stacked against him, and it would continue. Vicky Guerrero booked a TLC match for One Night Stand. The Undertaker versus Edge for the vacant World Heavyweight Championship. She also said that if The Undertaker loses, he will be banished from the entire WWE. On the final SmackDown before One Night Stand, Edge hosted the Cutting Edge with his guest being The Undertaker. The Rated R Superstar believed he would win because of experience, and he tried to play Undertaker's TLC highlights, but there was none. So he played his instead. The Undertaker came out and Edge was a bit worried. He added insult to injury, bringing out a casket since it was his last night on SmackDown, and Taker overcame La Familia while Edge was hiding. They took him out when Edge climbed the ladder and said this symbolizes him winning the title. The Undertaker though came back and dropped Ryder with the last stride. Edge made a run for it, and it was a short but intense build. The Rated R Superstar used his TLC experience as a means to finally regain the World Championship, a match that The Undertaker knows nothing about. This also made for an interesting match because it was one of the only times where The Undertaker was portrayed as the underdog. Edge took advantage of that and did well. As expected though, The Undertaker figured it out. The spots were great in this match. Undertaker was sending Edge through a ladder, throwing him all around, flying, La Familia coming in, getting thrown through tables. But in the end, Edge's TLC experience, along with the help of La Familia, helped him win the World Heavyweight Championship for the third time. Great match. It was so damn good. It was awesome. It was a great match. Edge had to work hard for Vicky's forgiveness, and even then it didn't work. He got her so mad to the point that she brought back The Undertaker and gave him a Hell in a Cell match against Edge. And this led to the Rated R Superstar basically losing himself. He said that he's been thinking constantly about this match and was looking crazy. He's been looking for ways to win the match, and this is when he revealed his guest on the cutting edge. It was Mick Foley. He brought him in and Edge said he knows something lingers in Foley's mind. He said he saw him before and after the match. Foley can't walk anymore because of The Undertaker. Edge was basically looking for help, but Foley couldn't. He said that there's only one man that could help him. Edge, the man that had the greatest hardcore match in WrestleMania history. If that man doesn't show up, The Undertaker will destroy him. Edge said he understood and attacked Mick Foley. He brought that aggression and intensity he had in the past and sent Mick Foley through a table. Great segment. Edge looked like somebody that lost sight of who he was. A joke. Vicky Guerrero turned him into a joke. Somebody that couldn't be taken serious, and Foley reminded him of who he was. The Rated R Superstar. The guy that blasts people with the concerto. That had that mean streak to him. Edge was basically back. And that was the Edge that had to go in there and face The Undertaker inside Hell in a Cell. If it wasn't that Edge, he was going to get destroyed. This ended up being Mick Foley's last appearance in WWE for a while. With that said, The Undertaker took out members of La Familia, causing Edge to go crazy and call him out. All of a sudden, he dropped Chavo with a chair, hit a concerto. Then to top it all off, he flipped Vicky's wheelchair. He blamed her for everything and said that Mick Foley was right. This is the Edge that needs to step into Hell in a Cell with The Undertaker. He promised to take her down to hell with him, and it was basically Edge who attacked La Familia earlier on. Edge was going crazy and losing his mind. He pushed her off the wheelchair and started going off about The Undertaker and their marriage, and it was some crazy stuff. Edge had done a great job of showing how much he lost himself. They didn't even need to bring in The Undertaker. All they had to do was sell the fear of The Undertaker. Edge, even during the match, was still so confident and prepared for the challenge. He actually did well and managed to adapt to the match. He had a creative spot with Edge spearing The Undertaker through the cell. He was one step ahead of The Undertaker most of the time. He was hitting him with a spear, a camera, and it still wasn't enough. The Undertaker made a comeback and dished out everything Edge did to him. He chokeslammed him through the table, speared him, hit him with a camera, hit the concerto, and to top it all off, the Tombstone Pile Driver. 1, 2, 3. Amazing ending, amazing match. It was paced like their feud. Edge in control for most of the time, but by the end, finally going down and paying for his sins. Then after the match, he chokeslammed him through the table and basically sent him to hell. From here, Edge went on a long hiatus for about 3 months, and The Undertaker feuded with La Familia.